Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of What If Deku exposed Bakugou's bullying to Class A. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. Times. Can't you look at me? Am I that hideous to you? Can't you talk to me? Do I really mean nothing to you? Turn away. Forget everything. That's okay. I regret nothing. Nothing. Hideous, by Mero. Times. Everyone in Class 1A was cessed at Katsuki. What cessed him off? He didn't know why they were acting like this. They definitely didn't try to make it subtle either. During class, he'd be glared at openly. During lunch, well, he'll just say according to his FR classmates, there wasn't enough space on the table he usually sat at. Which was such obvious bullshit he just left to eat elsewhere. He didn't care, though. Their loss, he really, truly didn't care. Why did he feel like he was convincing himself? What didn't help was that Midoriya was acting more skittish and guilty than usual. A glance shot in his direction by Katsuki would make him smile weakly but then look down, as if ashamed. He was quieter. And he looked uncomfortable whenever a classmate would accidentally shove into Katsuki, or would accidentally leave their leg out conveniently to make him stumble a little. Each time the person would apologize, but it was so fake Katsuki almost wanted to hide his look of disgust and anger. It was so frustrating that they'd openly lie to his face like that. Say, "Oh, I'm so sorry." Or, "Oh, I didn't mean to. Sorry." Or, "Oh, did I hurt you? Sorry." Sorry, effing sorry. How effing stupid, how gullible, how weak did he look to them? It hurt. So when, for what must have been the 50th time someone purposely stuck their leg out, he snapped. I'm effing done with this. What the F is everyone's problem? He snapped to the classroom. It was home time, he should be out of this DMN classroom by now, but he needed to know. He was tired of all this shit. Midoriya turned to look at him from where he was gathering his things. He hesitated, looking around the silent classroom, and Katsuki watched him closely. Eventually he steeled himself to do something, and opened his mouth. "Kaken, What are you talking about, Bakugou?" Uraraka cut in. Her voice was sweet, but Katsuki knew better. He heard the venom, the anger, in her tone. He scowled. "The F do you mean? You think I'm so effing stupid to not see what everyone's doing? Or that I'm naive enough? Gullible, maybe?" "Ha!" Todoroki spoke up. That should have been a warning. Todoroki rarely meddled with class drama. He spoke calmly, but like Uraraka, it was obvious it was hiding anger. "Fine, if you'd really like to know. We were just giving you a taste of your own medicine." "And what the F does that mean?" Katsuki snapped. "It means," Kirishima said, and against his will, the look on his face made Katsuki's heart deflate a little. "That we know what you did in middle school." Katsuki's eyes widened slightly. He scowled deeper. That, it could mean many things, but in this context, the answer was obvious. "And what might that effing be?" Midoriya tried to speak. "Kaken, I promise you, I didn't mean to say it. I was tired, under Recovery Girl's quirk. I never meant to go back on it, I swear, and I am so sorry." "We know," Uraraka said while putting a hand on Midoriya's shoulder as if she was protecting him, "that you bullied him. That you bullied our friend. Our friend. That they were acting as if they didn't regard him as a friend either. Sure, he acted rough and cessed on the outside, but he really thought that maybe they. He didn't care. He didn't." Midoriya shrugged her hand off and frowned. "Hey, you don't understand, it was my fault too. And Kaken's learning, he's getting kinder and learning from it all. We're getting so close to how we used to be, can't you just let that happen? Please?" "Midoriya," Ida said, hands chopping stiffly, "please, stop trying to defend him. It's all right." "But it isn't," Midoriya said, frown deepening. "You don't understand, you all don't understand. Kaken, tell them. Tell them how we're getting better, Tell them how you're learning, we both are. Just effing drop it, Deku, Katsuki said lowly. Midoriya did, if only because of shock. The blonde hated how weak he felt. Since when had he allowed himself to be so free around them? So, you, emotional and sensitive? God, Katsuki wished he'd never asked. But at the same time, he would have done it again. Because then he'd be living in this ignorant bubble where he still thought he was getting better and that maybe he could put this all behind them, because he was trying. This ignorant bubble where his classmates would understand, tolerate him even if his worst parts were revealed to them, past or not be DM'd. Ashido said, glaring at him. I don't get how you can act like you've done nothing wrong. Are you really that much of a villain? No, he's just regrettably great at acting, even when he kinda wished he wasn't. Kaminari shook his head in his seat. Not cool, man. Katsuki knows. God, he knows that and it feels terrible. Zero huffed and turned away from Katsuki. I can't believe I hung out with you for so long. He didn't even expect them to like him in the first place. He wished they understood. And not even an excuse. Kirishima scowled deeper at Katsuki. There is none. I deserve it all. Disappointment, betrayal, and hatred. That's all they showed to him. The very few people he'd actually ever begun to trust in his entire life. But Katsuki? He kept his head high. He kept his shoulders back. He kept his unbothered scowl fixed on his face, even as he turned and walked out, even as they yelled insults at his back, even as his heart became harder and harder and walls built higher and higher. Because if he didn't, they'd see what he really was. Weak. Plus, at the dorms, Katsuki was doing his homework in the common room. It wasn't unusual, he often went there if his room was starting to feel small. Around him. Apparently now he was doing something effing wrong. Bakugou. Move, Uraraka said bittersweetly, standing above him with her arms crossed. He didn't look up from the maths equation in front of him. Fna. She huffed. I want to sit there, Bakugou. So move. She said his name as if it was an insult. Katsuki couldn't care less. And I was here first, pink cheeks. YA snooze, YA lose. F off. Despite the respect Katsuki used to have for Uraraka's great strength and determination, she was apparently not so great in the sharp-tongue section. She stared at him, obviously wanting to say something but coming up with nothing. Eventually, she just blurted, fine. You're selfish anyway, what did I expect? Katsuki lowered his homework book slightly and gave her an unimpressed look, before returning back to where he'd been in the equation. She walked away with an angry fire in her eye. Not 5 minutes later, someone new interrupted him. Hey, would you look at that? Bakugou's actually calm for once, how rare. Mineta snorted as he waddled past. Katsuki'll be DM'd if he lets Mineta of all people set him off. That guy was a walking, idiotic, overgrown grape. He doubted a word coming out of his mouth used more than 2 brain cells, if any. But then Katsuki heard Kaminari sigh as he came out of the kitchen and gave Katsuki a glare. The latter stiffened in preparation of whatever was about to happen. Kaminari walked over to Gyro, who was sitting on a nearby table. He whispered, but it was purposely loud enough for Katsuki to hear. Yeah, it is rare, here? I can't believe I was friends with him. The signs were there all along, I just tagged along cause I was friends with Kiri. Okay, that was effing low. He won't even deny it to himself anymore, it hurt. But as much as he wanted to jump up and yell at him, he knew it wouldn't help. They'd twist his words and actions, probably. Subconsciously, he knew he'd have to keep his guard up from now on. Anything could be used against him. Even with his used-to-be, closest friends. He clenched his jaw and continued his homework as they continued to insult and spew hateful things about him to each other. He didn't walk out. That might make them think they've won. No, instead, when he finished his homework, he got his phone out. He could practically hear the people around him grind their teeth in frustration. He smirked. They were silly to think he'd go down so easily. Times. Cause you remind me every day. I'm not enough, but I still stay. July, by Noah Cyrus. Times. Katsuki came to school the next day with his head up and shoulders back, to his classmates' apparent disappointment. SCK on that, assholes. He also came with fed up and sloppily bandaged knuckles, but if Kirishima heard a few noises yesterday, he didn't mention it. Katsuki ignored the uncomfortable and seemingly guilty look on Kirishima's face as it slowly was wiped off and replaced with some kind of self-reassured anger only minutes later. And alright, so maybe the situation was sort of getting to him, after so many weeks of this bullshit and only now finding out the unlovable, disgusting truth that his classmates knew. And maybe punching his wall until blood appeared may not have been a good decision, but at the time it seemed effing great to let it all out and let the pain ground him. For some reason it felt kinda good. It always had, the pain. It distracted him like nothing else could. When he walked into the classroom, all eyes were on him. Ah, shit. He was later than usual if nearly everyone was here. Just keep your head up and shoulders back. They can't see. Don't let them see. Uraraka scoffed from her seat. What's that on your hands, Bakugou? He probably got that fighting someone somehow, didn't you, Bakugou? Too angry because of yesterday? Bakugou's jaw set. Shut up, pink cheeks. She fumed, the tension in the room rising. Don't tell me to. Everyone calm down, Ida said, hands chopping. Class will be starting soon, so everyone just settle down. But he was mainly speaking to Katsuki. Even though effing Uraraka had picked a fight with him in the first place. He snarled and shoved his bag under his desk as he sat down harshly. Whatever. The class slowly began to get louder as everyone continued to talk among themselves. Katsuki just decided to look out the window and think about whether or not it was worth it to get food from the cafeteria. Even though he hadn't eaten breakfast, he had a granola bar stuffed in his pocket, so really, he didn't need to. Although, after that he'd have many classes to get through, so. After a minute or two, he felt someone tap his shoulder lightly. He ignored it, in case it was some annoying prick coming to tell him how villainous he was. Again and harder, they tapped his shoulder. Katsuki heard Midoriya hiss, "Kaken." "Hello." The class quietened a little. Katsuki could feel everyone's stares. He sighed, but didn't turn. "What, Deku?" "I want to know. What happened?" he asked. "You don't pick random fights with people, I know you don't, and I haven't heard of a fight either. And, well, you know how news travels. So if it wasn't with someone else, and you haven't gone to Recovery Girl yet, that only leaves one other option, Anne. Why did you start doing it again?" He sounded so sad. Katsuki swallowed thickly. Goddamn it. And Midoriya for asking him, even if he knew he really was just worried. He shouldn't be. He deserved the pain from his throbbing fists, he deserved more than that, even. And no, it wasn't self-harm, as Midoriya seemed to think. It was different, this was barely anything. "Kaken?" "Doesn't matter, nerd," he muttered. "Drop it." Midoriya huffed, "You can say what you want, but that's not going to stop me from worrying about you." Katsuki turned around, only to see Uraraka and Todoroki glaring at him from behind Midoriya. He focused on Midoriya's determined face instead and frowned. "I'm not effing weak, I can handle myself, and there's nothing to effing worry about," he snapped. "I'm effing fine." "I know you're not weak and I know you can handle yourself," Midoriya said, "but look, can I talk to you after school ends?" Katsuki clenched his teeth, thinking. "Fine. My dorm." Midoriya beamed. "Okay. Your dorm then. Thanks, Kaken." "Whatever, nerd." Katsuki turned back as Aizawa walked in. "Sit down, everyone," he drawled. Uraraka and Todoroki quickly found their seats, taking a break from glaring holes into Katsuki's head, finally, before only resuming it once seating themselves, effing hell. Katsuki focused back to the front, where Aizawa was watching them thoughtfully. Katsuki doubled down on his scowl and Aizawa shook his head in exasperation. The teacher turned to the front and began talking. Katsuki tuned him out when nothing applied to him. Back to lunch, since he didn't even feel hungry, maybe he shouldn't even bother sitting in the cafeteria today? That is, if he turns up before his classmates. Spite was the only reason he was really still sitting there for lunch, actually. It was his own way to say you to everyone. He'd found that if he sat at his usual table before them, they'd find another table to sit at. Telling him to move wouldn't be very good in front of the whole school, now would it? And they can't sit with Bakugou Katsuki, now can they? The very person who cruelly bullied their innocent friend. That wouldn't look very good either. On the other hand, at least half the school had noticed by now, and they were keeping their distance too. Giving him weird looks. Avoiding him like the plague. They were just cowards. Something hit the back of his head. It was light, so he wasn't even sure if it had happened, but behind him, Midoriya yelped quietly in surprise. So he wasn't imagining it, and it wasn't Midoriya who had hit him. But still, it might have been an accident or something, and no one else seemed to notice, so. Less than a few seconds later, another thing hit his head, and Midoriya jolted again. Okay, so on purpose then. He glanced at the floor, where a paper ball rolled near his foot. He scowled and glanced around the room. Since a good handful of the class was glaring at him, it wouldn't have really been exactly obvious. But Katsuki wasn't stupid. Uraraka was glaring at him fiercer than anyone from the other side of the room. She had a paper ball half-made in her hand. Katsuki scoffed and turned back. She was on the other side of the DMN room. Why was she going to such childish extremes for something that wasn't even any of her DMN business? Another paper ball hit his head and he clenched his teeth, whipping round and flipping her off. So yes, that will mean eating other people's food. Aizawa stopped talking. Alright, enough. Uraraka, you're being warned. If this happens again, it's detention. What? Uraraka cried. Bakugou smirked. When she scowled at him. But why? Aizawa raised his eyebrows. Did you really just ask why I'm warning you to stop throwing paper ball at a classmate during lesson time? This may be homeroom, but I expect all of your attention, just like any other class. Well, Uraraka seemed at a loss for words. She huffed. He deserves it, anyway. You don't know what he did. Aizawa looked so tired at that moment he looked as if he was about to sleep and never wake up. Katsuki could relate. Uraraka, I don't want to know about your teenage squabbles or little arguments. I just want you to stop interrupting class time. She kicked back in her seat and crossed her arms angrily. Aizawa sighed, thank you. No more childish arguments will be brought into my class from now on. Now, back to class notices, that will mean that no one will be allowed to eat other people's food. This usually goes without saying, but apparently you kids are so incredibly dense when it comes to this, so I'm also asking you to put your name on your food when you put it away so that it's so obvious to even the most troublesome kids in here. Katsuki should have felt good that Uraraka was being told off, effing finally. The whole class seemed to look at themselves at the small wake-up call, and it was great seeing many of his classmates lower their heads slightly in shame. Katsuki should have been glad, but he wasn't. It occurred to him then, what would he do if the teachers found out about the bullying? Would they understand or not? Just now, Aizawa had stopped Uraraka, but would he continue if he knew? Teachers had so much control over someone's life. They can take away points for something usually insignificant, or maybe fail a few tests, just because they didn't particularly like a student. If the teachers found out about the bullying, they'd hate him, no doubt. His whole future career could be over before he'd gotten the chance to start it. Despite his best efforts, it scared him. Times. Oh, the misery. Everybody wants to be my enemy. Spare the sympathy. Everybody wants to be my enemy. Enemy, by Imagine Dragons. Times. Are you sure you want to talk to him? Alone, no less. Uraraka whispered loudly behind Katsuki as he packed his things. I mean, since he's your bully, was your bully. Katsuki scowled and shoved his textbook into his bag, harsher. I'm flattered you care so much about me, but he could picture Midoriya waving his hands around behind him. Honestly, I'll be fine. As I keep telling you, Kaken's changed, he won't do anything to me. Uraraka sighed. Midoriya, it's okay. Victims of abuse usually deny it at first, so we understand that you're having a hard time accepting it, but it's okay to hate him and just accept that Bakugou's a shitty person. It was quiet for a second, and Katsuki believed for a second that he would finally hate him just like the rest of them, that Midoriya was finally just accepting he wasn't worth shit. "Kaken, are you ready?" And there the nerd was, beside his desk with his yellow backpack slung on one shoulder and a blinding grin. So apparently he hadn't accepted it yet. Or, he was waiting to be alone to start spewing how much he hated him. He wasn't sure which he preferred. Katsuki almost regretted agreeing to talking, if not for the fact that he had his own questions to ask Midoriya too. The blonde slung his own bag over his shoulder and walked past Midoriya towards the class door with a grunt. Midoriya smiled and rushed into step with him. Katsuki hesitated at the door, turning when he felt something was off. He narrowed his eyes at Uraraka's scowl and Todoroki's angry stare. No. His gaze fell on Ida, who looked away and adjusted his glasses stiffly. He looked oddly blank. Whatever was going on, Katsuki had a bad feeling about it. One that set his gut churning and mind whirring. "Kaken, come on." With one last glare, he turned and left. TCH. Yeah, nerd. The door slammed. He didn't see Ida turning to the class a few seconds later and asking for everyone's attention. Plus, the walk to the dorms was quiet. Not many people were on the streets, but birdsong filled the background, as well as the occasional passing car. Izuku wasn't sure what to say. He didn't know what to do, or what Bakugou needed, or what he was going through, or even if talking would help. He just didn't know. He wanted to scream at his classmates every time someone glared at Bakugou. Every time someone spat an insult. Every time someone told Izuku that he was only a victim after all, why did they have to make him sound so weak? Or that Bakugou was the problem there, that he should hate the blonde, blame him. Izuku didn't, duh. And he didn't think he would anytime soon, either. He just wanted them to understand that, though. When he told them about everything, he'd never meant to, and he'd take it back if he could. Just so that everything could go back to normal, until, of course, they'd decide to explain to the class together, when they were ready. But he couldn't, now. Even if he had been in a sleepy state, he remembered every second, every word, every breath that had been exchanged at that moment. He had been groggy, so tired, when he had woken up on Recovery Girl's med bed. Uraraka and Todoroki had been at his side when he had, and they had asked him how he felt. It had been a simple question. But his brain couldn't think, it was too foggy, too muddled to think. So he'd replied, somewhat jokingly, "I feel like I'm back in middle school with Kaken." Uraraka had laughed and asked, "Why, was your middle school with Bakugou bad?" "Aho, yeah," he had chuckled, slowly gaining his brain cells back slowly. "Being beaten by him every day didn't make it my favorite time to be alive, you know?" And oh, how he regretted it. As their faces morphed to horror and shock. As he realized only a second or two later what he had done. He tried to make it not seem as bad as what he'd just said, considering his phrasing was definitely not, well, right, but they didn't listen, and everything he said only seemed to make it worse. Since then, they'd coddled him, painting Bakugou to be the bad guy and him the poor victim. Izuku despised it. And not only because they were treating his oldest, closest friend so terribly. Ever since he was young, he'd been coddled like some kind of defenseless baby made of glass. Ever since he was young, he'd hated it, and he wasn't about to stop. It made him feel so weak and stupid. He was so tired of it. Izuku knew they were probably just trying to look out for him. To help him. But it destroyed all point if the help wasn't wanted, if their protection was unwanted, if they wouldn't effing listen to him. At this point they were doing more harm than good. Every time Izuku tried to tell them to hear Bakugou out, or that it wasn't all Bakugou's fault, or that Bakugou was better now, it was all shot down with a, "Don't worry, Midoriya. We'll help you, Midoriya. You're just a little blind because you're a victim, Midoriya, it's not your fault you can't see it yet. But don't worry, we'll help you see how terrible Bakugou really is." And it was actually getting on his last nerve, which was an achievement in itself. Izuku rarely got mad, unless villains doing cruel shit was part of it. And no, he hissed to a voice sounding like his friend's in his head, Kaken did not count, and he'd Delaware smash the voice's head in, thought or not be determined, he'd find a way. As much as Izuku could get angry, he was also good at reining in that anger if it got too much, resulting in him never swearing, glaring or fighting anyone unless it had good reason. Which is why he's even more disappointed in his friends when right before class was dismissed for the day, only a few minutes ago now, he'd glared at them harshly, and Uraraka only shook her head in pity as he went over to Bakugou's desk to ask if he was ready. Pity. Effing pit. Know what was funny about that? The fact that Izuku had done so many things. He'd survived 14 years, quirkless. He'd accepted a quirk from All Might which had the possibility to rip his limbs off the first time he'd try it. Thank God that didn't happen, on that note. He'd watched as his friends and teacher nearly got killed at one of his first training exercises. Shigaraki had his hand almost closed around Izuku's neck, a pinky away from being killed, once or twice. He'd watched as his best friend was kidnapped before his eyes and he'd destroyed his body to protect a single child against a man with inhuman strength and muscle. All of this, done by the age of 15. And that wasn't even half of it all. Izuku had done all of that, and what did he get? Effing pity, about something that wasn't even any of their business and was barely a scratch compared to what else he'd done, something that had been put behind him and Bakugou and talked over and smoothed down. They were trying to break the friendship Izuku and Bakugou were trying to remake and Izuku really didn't like it. Izuku sighed and decided to focus on the walk and the things around him that looked pretty in the evening light. He didn't want to be mad at that moment. The two childhood friends were at the dorms in no time. Bakugou walked ahead of him and swung his dorm room's door open. Don't touch my sheet, nerd. Izuku chuckled lightly. Yeah, Kakin. The door swung shut behind them and Bakugou immediately flopped onto his bed. Izuku swung his desk chair around and sat on it backwards to face him. It was awkward for a second, before Izuku found the words to speak. So, Kakin. There's a lot to talk about. Yeah, no fucking sheet, Bakugou muttered. So then, let's start with the whole situation, Izuku said. You know I don't blame you for it, right? Bakugou was unusually quiet. Kakin? A disgruntled sigh was all Izuku got. And it spoke volumes. Kakin, I don't blame you for it, no matter what everyone else says. Oh yeah? Well you effing should, Bakugou snapped. You didn't deserve that, I'm a sheet person for doing it, so. Was, Kakin. Was. Izuku corrected. I'm not excusing what you did, 'cause bullying someone just isn't it. But you've grown up, can't you see? Why can't anyone see how far you've come? You understand now, you know stuff now. Izuku frowned when Bakugou didn't try to say something. How badly had his classmates really hurt him? He was starting to realize just how good his acting must be if even he'd been completely fooled by his confidence in class the last few weeks. He wasn't going to lie. It scared him. Kakin, it wasn't even all your fault. I've got to say, I was a creep, honestly. Following you around every day, writing notes on every little move, never leaving you alone. I could have at least picked up some weights. My arms were pretty much noodles, I gotta admit. Yeah, if someone did that to me I'd be kinda overwhelmed or frustrated. Bakugou's voice was tired and quiet. But I still shouldn't have. This is all in past tense, Kakin. Izuku hissed, frustrated. All in past tense. That means that we're over it, okay? I'm over it, I don't blame you for it, I forgive you for it anyway, so let's leave it done and dusted, for All Might's sake. Bakugou sat up and narrowed his eyes at him. But those are just words, and I really effing. No! Izuku interrupted with finality. No self-loathing under my roof. The blonde blinked in confusion, a scowl settling. But this is my fucking dorm room. So technically. Yeah, well I didn't really think it out, it was kinda an in-the-moment kinda thing that would shut you up, so whatever, Izuku huffed, anger still lingering. They both sighed tiredly, sagging in their seats. Then Izuku started giggling. Do you remember that one time when we were kids, like 4 or 5, and I was crying for whatever reason, and you had some apple slices for your lunch so you just... Bakugou snorted, oh, yeah. I shoved one of them in your mouth. You asked why later and I said it was just an in-the-moment thing that would shut me up. Izuku laughed. Or in class, in the first year, Bakugou grinned. You nearly told everyone about All Might's effing quirk being passed down to you, and I said, yeah, that was so mean, Kaken. Izuku said, playfully pouting. You yelled villain, so I stopped what I was doing and looked around, completely panicking, but when I saw you, you just walked by and said calmly, psych, fucker. And what's more, later you just said it was an in-the-moment thing. Like, you couldn't think of better? It was the most embarrassing day of heroics. You should have seen your effing face though. Bakugou snorted. Fucking hilarious. Kaken. Izuku whined. A peaceful silence stretched over them. Izuku sighed in content, chuckling slightly. Honestly, I'd have thought you'd be way more angry than this. I was almost scared for my life. Bakugou immediately stiffened as his jaw locked and he sat up, leaning himself against the wall instead. He wasn't facing Izuku anymore. Yeah, he said coldly. Most people effing assume that nowadays. Izuku blinked in confusion. What? Oh, wait, no, damn it, it didn't mean it like that. I meant, like, I'd be pretty mad if someone went back on their promise to me. And if it pretty much ruined my social life. You handled it better than I would. I'm not mad, 'cause I effing Bakugou caught himself and looked away with a huff through his nose. Izuku had a sneaking suspicion on what he was about to say. Apparently their conversation hadn't swayed his thoughts much. He frowned, though. If nothing he said would get through, how was he supposed to help his best friend realize that no, he really doesn't deserve it? It was similar to a different question he'd asked himself many times before. And the answer rarely failed him. Who would be able to help Kaken if he won't accept it from me? Izuku mentally told himself to meet with Kirishima as soon as possible. He just really hoped Kirishima would listen. Before it was too late. Look, Deku, Bakugou sighed, jolting Izuku from his thoughts. Just leave everything alone. I don't need effing pity. What? Izuku frowned in confusion. Bakugou glared at Izuku from the corner of his eye. You think I'm effing blind, too? I see when you try and defend me against everyone or reason with people to effing leave me alone. I don't effing need that. I can handle on my own without you making me the damsel in effing distress. Izuku shook his head. That wasn't what I was doing, I was just... What, effing Deku? 'Cause the way I see it, you're effing coddling me as if I'm a effing charity case. Bakugou snarled, so newsflash, dickhead, I don't need your shitty help. I don't effing care about what they say about me. I don't care what they effing think. I don't care that they think I'm rude or weak or stupid, I don't effing care. Get that through your effing thick butt head and stop babying me just to make yourself feel better that you told them. I'm not some tool you can use to make yourself feel better. Izuku? Babying someone? Let alone Bakugou himself? Hadn't he just thought about how much he hated that himself? Maybe Izuku was doing it by accident and didn't realize, but that didn't mean Bakugou could just lash out at him for just trying to be nice. It was barely even coddling, he didn't know what it really felt like to feel so weak and useless. Izuku scowled. Because you'd sure know how it feels to be a tool to make someone feel better. You did it to me for so many years, and I'm not even being cruel about it right now. I'm trying to actually be nice. Bakugou glowered, standing up. His fists crackled ever so slightly. Yeah, effing right. You know what, I really regret effing agreeing to this talk right now. You're the last person I should be effing talking to right now, 'cause all you do is mess things up between us. Yeah? Well, I regret ever trying to defend you in class. I should have known it would end useless and with fighting. It always does with you, doesn't it? Izuku stood up too, eyes narrowing and flickering with green power. Huh? I regret even attempting to understand where you came from, effing piece of shit. You probably did it all on effing purpose. Bakugou yelled. You know what, even though I didn't, I should have told them long ago. You never should have gotten a say on when anyway. I'm the one who was affected. And as you know, the real kicker is. I regret ever trying to make amends with you in the first place. Izuku roared. They're right. They're all right. You might as well be a villain, 'Cause you sure as hell act like it. You're ignorant and selfish and villainous, and what the hell did I ever see in you back then? It was quiet, after. Izuku fell back to earth quickly, the haze of anger he was in, gone in an instant. Bakugou's face was carefully blank as he looked away from him and walked over to his door, opening it. Kaken, out. Izuku searched Bakugou's face. He wanted to tell him how much he didn't mean those words. He wanted to tell him he never regretted being Bakugou's friend. He wanted to tell him he still looked up to the blonde almost as much as All Might himself. But he didn't find anything on his friend's face. No sadness, no regret, no anger, at least to him, no nothing. It was blank, unreadable. Right now, Izuku had no way of telling which was the right way to go about it. Izuku walked out without another word. He'd fed up. He'd fed up real bad. And this time, he wasn't even sure if he'd be able to fix it. Times. You look away from me and I see. There's something you're trying to hide. And I reach for your hand but it's cold, you pull away again. And I wonder what's on your mind. Be Alright, by Dean Lewis. Times. At this point, Katsuki was almost sure he'd finally hit rock bottom, and hopefully the only way to go next was up. Honestly. His closest friends thought he was a villain, the whole class hated him. Midoriya had informed him that everything he'd told him about wanting to make amends was a effing lie, right after trying to assure him that things aren't his fault, too. And Katsuki had been so sure that he'd meant those words, so how could he be sure of anything anyone else said, now? Maybe no one's ever really held hope for him, after all. He felt like sheet, and he was sheet. Sadly, however, apparently it's possible to have another rock bottom after a effing rock bottom. Katsuki wanted to throw a chair at whoever was making his life so sheet up there somewhere. Or maybe something that dealt more damage, like a very large explosion. In the dorms that morning, it was obvious something had happened between Midoriya and Katsuki. He saw some people try to talk to the freckled one, but each and every time he shut them down harshly and tried to meet Katsuki's eye. Katsuki didn't let him. Hence the word tried. Even before class, as they waited for Aizawa to walk in, the nerd's friends seemed unsure on which path to take for the day, annoy Katsuki in the worst ways possible or just let it go for a single day, which apparently seemed like the hardest thing on earth at the moment. Considering the bad mood Midoriya seemed to be in, they had apparently decided to make sure he was okay above all, while giving Katsuki putrid looks. Since they were aimed at the back of his head, he didn't give two sheets. In conclusion, the day had been going relatively normal, as it had for the past 3 weeks. Until Aizawa came in and the whole atmosphere just got dumped in ice. That was, Katsuki thought, the moment where the most anxiety he'd ever experienced decided to rear its stupid, shitty head and make his stomach feel like a effing blender. No stars, would not recommend. His teacher stood at the front of class. His gaze, cold, icy, calculating, was fixed on Katsuki. He hated it. It made him feel like even more of a villain. Homeroom will be cancelled today. Instead use this as a study PRD, Aizawa said. No one do anything stupid while I'm gone, and Bakugou. Follow me. Don't complain or resist, that'll only make things worse. Katsuki's blood turned to ice. He had a good idea of what was about to happen, and he didn't like it. He stood up with a scowl, swung his bag over his shoulder, God knows what his classmates would do to it if he left it there, and walked after Aizawa. He sent an icy glare at the class. He knew they all just had to have something to do with this. Especially with how Ida was smiling as he pushed his glasses up his nose. His only comfort was that Midoriya just looked lost and worried compared to the class. He must know what this is about too, but by the looks of it, he wasn't in on it. As usual, fussing around Katsuki. It only brought a sting in his chest when he considered how it was probably just an act to make people feel more sorry for him, the poor victim, and to deceive Katsuki. Again. He turned and walked out, hoping his stance was more confident than he felt. He felt like the world was against him at that moment. Plus, Shota was angry. And disappointed. But mostly angry. To think such a big thing had been staring him in the face, and he'd completely missed it? He glanced at the boy walking beside him and frowned. It was strange, though. He'd been expecting at least some colorful language thrown at him when he told Bakugou to follow him. Some part of Shota was worried for his student. He seemed to be losing the familiar confident and angry spark in his eye lately. He squashed it down. Now was not the time. He guessed that maybe Bakugou just knew what was happening and knew he couldn't fight it, but then again, even if he knew he couldn't, Bakugou usually always tried anyway. It's what made him so inspiringly stubborn. Shota huffed quietly and pulled his capture weapon higher over his nose. No. Bakugou probably just knew that it was no point now to try to stop things. He remembered what had happened the day before and his anger swelled up again. Ida had come over to him sleeping in the corner and asked for his attention. The whole class, sans Bakugou and Midoriya, was still there even if class had ended, like, at least 5 minutes ago. We have something to tell you, Aizawa. Ida had said, arms chopping. We believe it is important and has gone too far. We'd like to do something about it, already. And then, he told him. He spoke about how Midoriya had been bullied in middle school by Bakugou. He spoke about Bakugou's violent tendencies linking up to this and his horrible name-calling. He spoke about how Midoriya used to flinch every time Bakugou used his explosions, which only backed up his point. It didn't occur to him that maybe Midoriya hadn't consented to this being shared. How could Shota have missed such obvious signs? He swore to himself he'd make sure to keep an eye out for all of his students from now on. The teacher wouldn't let himself make the same mistake twice. Before long they were at Principal Nedzu's office. With a warning glare that Bakugou scoffed and rolled his eyes to, Shota knocked, before pushing the door open. Nedzu was sitting at his desk when they came in, and he smiled, lifting a teacup. Ah, Aizawa. How lovely to see you, and Bakugou too. I've been expecting you. Do take a seat. Shota and his student did so. Nedzu smiled and put his teacup down, gesturing to 2 other, still steaming, teacups on the small table in front of them. They both picked them up hesitantly. The cups stayed clasped in his hands. He didn't move, even as the china warmed his hands quickly. His mind was too busy. The principal's eyes stayed fixed on Bakugou, gaze unwavering and expression fixed. So, Bakugou, you know why you're here? Bakugou clicked his tongue. No. What the F is it? You know, like a liar. Nedzu didn't seem disappointed, nor the opposite. He just continued to look on as the blonde spoke. At this point Shota was slightly admiring the fact that Bakugou was meeting the stare head-on, showing no signs of nervousness or shame. Shota knew he had a great death stare. It sometimes came with the job, but even he was forced to look away from the principal's stare at times. Not to worry, Bakugou. You'll be going straight back to class soon, if things go well, Nedzu said. We'll go straight to the point. It has come to our attention that you bullied one of our students in Class A, Midoriya Izuku, back in middle school. Is this correct? Bakugou's jaw locked, but he didn't look away. Yeah. All right. Thank you for being honest, Bakugou. Now, we, here at UA, are very strict on our no bullying rule. A hero school does not tolerate bullying at all. This should be punishable by expulsion, Nedzu continued. Bakugou finally looked away, stiffening a little. Shota lifted an eyebrow. Should be? Nedzu slid his gaze to Shota, taking a sip of his tea. Yes. Aizawa, because Bakugou here bullied Midoriya in a different school, we technically shouldn't expel him for this. Also, considering he is one of our best students, it would be unfortunate to lose such a promising future hero. Bakugou perked up a little more, scowl loosening a little in surprise or, maybe, hope? Unless, of course, Aizawa, Nedzu continued, you'd like to expel him nonetheless? You have expelled many students before for much less trivial things. If you'd like to expel Bakugou, that should be possible. Bakugou stiffened again, eyes flicking between the principal and his teacher anxiously. Shota frowned. When he first heard about the whole ordeal, he'd wanted Bakugou to be expelled, or maybe even a little more punishment than that. But now, well, maybe he didn't know the whole story and would be doing the wrong thing? And anyway, it was true that Bakugou was one of his best students in Class A. To expel him over something that happened in the past which he had not done since attending UA, as far as Shota was concerned, would be, well, illogical. Shota sighed. He was too soft on these children. I don't think I will expel him. However, calling his parents may be a good decision to make sure we're making the right choice. Shota noticed when Bakugou slowly sat up straight in his seat and clenched his jaw. He noticed when his eyes became slightly panicked and flickered around the room. He noticed when his hands clenched around his shirt so tightly his fists turned white. Shota was a teacher. He helped people become heroes or stop them from pursuing something that would end up in a tragedy. But as a teacher who had gone through so much with his students, he couldn't help but care about them. When he'd heard about Midoriya having been bullied, he felt protective of him because he just knew the kid didn't deserve it, especially with what that kid himself had been through in his first year only. And seeing Bakugou's violent tendencies, especially at the start of their first year, he just knew the bullying must have been extremely unpleasant or at least damaging. Being bullied by a fearless, powerful and probably stronger person couldn't have been easy. But in front of him now, with said bully subtly shaking at the mere mention of calling his parents, he knew he must have something wrong about this whole thing. He'd missed something in this story, he was sure of it. This wasn't just a bully and a victim from the past. It was much more complicated. He was missing something big and he knew it was staring him in the face, but he just couldn't figure it out. He remembered when he'd visited the Bakugou household to ask permission to keep the kids in the dorms. He got a really bad feeling when he remembered how his mother had acted, things he'd forgotten about quickly because they seemed like they were just things some parents do to DSPL and their child. But now, no. That couldn't be it, he won't let that be it. Shota turned back to Nezu. The principal must have noticed this too, and by the glint in his eye Shota had a feeling something was being planned. Shota ignored it for the moment and sighed tiredly. Actually, no. Let's just leave it. I want to decide if Bakugou deserves it here or not myself. Don't call his parents just yet unless we decide he's to be expelled. Bakugou, that means you need to be on your top behavior from now on to convince us further. You are to come with me back to class, if that's all right with you, Nezu? Bakugou sighed silently in relief. He relaxed a little, shoulders dropping and hands slowly unclenching. Shota hoped he made the right decision. Nezu smiled. Of course. You have around 15 minutes left of homeroom, Bakugou. Not too much time wasted. Now run along, don't be late for your next lesson. Bakugou nodded slightly to Nezu, as what Shota suspected to be his version of thanks. On the walk back from the office, it was quiet, as it had been before. But this time, Bakugou seemed different. He walked, looked and acted exactly the same as usual. But this time he had a fire in his eyes that Shota hadn't noticed leave. And yet, still, doubt lingered in Shota's mind. Had he made the right decision? Times. Soldier, keep on marching on. Head down till the work is done. Waiting on that morning sun. Soldier, keep on marching on. Soldier, by Fleury. Times. Okako was doing the right thing. She must be, right? It was simple. Bakugou had bullied her best friend, so he deserved all this anyway. If you do a bad thing, you should receive a bad thing in return. It's karma, something that Bakugou should have received long ago. The fact that he doesn't even seem to have a single sliver of guilt in him for the things he'd done is even worse. It just shows how much of an awful person he is and how much he'd been let off the hook for too long. Midoriya just didn't accept that. Okako and her friends needed to show him how blind he was and get justice for him themselves. After all, part of being a hero was helping people, right? As a future hero, she couldn't just let this slide and allow Bakugou to carry on his torment. At the moment, however, Midoriya still wasn't seeing that. But that's fine, she'd be patient. As soon as the door shut and Aizawa and Bakugou left, presumably to talk with Principal Nezu and finally give him what the boy deserved, Midoriya stood up with a frown, walking over to Okako and Ida on the other side of the room. What did you do? He asked icily. Okako almost felt guilty, but she knew she had done the right thing, so everything would be fine. Midoriya would thank her later, when he understands. A few other classmates either stood up too or just watched as the scene unfolded from their seats. Todoroki walked up from behind to try and calm Midoriya down. Midoriya, you need to try and understand that what we did was. No, Midoriya snapped, turning to have all three of his closest friends in his sight. I asked you a question. Will I have to repeat it, or will you tell me what I should to know? Ida pushed his glasses up his nose, avoiding eye contact. We told Aizawa what we felt he needed to know. What he does with that information, we let him decide as the adult, teacher, and pro-hero. Hold on, wait a sec, let me get this straight, Midoriya said, too, calmly. You, knowing something that happened to me, something that is my business and should be my business only, something that I should decide whether or not I want to share with an adult or not, you told Aizawa, our teacher, all about it. Ida swallowed thickly, seemingly lost for words. Okiko decided to take over. We only told Aizawa because we knew you would never do it yourself. You're too obsessed with this dream that Bakugou is a good person to try and heal from it all. We had to make that decision for you, as your friends, Midoriya. Midoriya shook his head, eyes flickering to meet everyone else's. But I've already healed from it. Me and Kaken are over it, don't you see? Why can't you see? Both of us are fine now. Then what happened yesterday? You said you wanted to talk to him and then came to school the next day, all sad-like. He makes you sad, Midoriya. Okiko argued. It was true, of course. Everyone saw how Midoriya was in a foul mood that day, and it must have happened with Bakugou since he was fine the day before. No, that's not his fault. Well, it was sort of both our faults. I didn't realize he didn't like how I was acting and I shouldn't have said such things. Midoriya frowned sadly. And yes, he shouldn't have yelled or argued first, but, still. We were both in the wrong yesterday. Ashido walked over with a sad expression. She sighed. Look, Midoriya. You have to see both sides of the story, you know? Midoriya scoffed and opened his mouth to say something, but Ashido didn't give him the time. Did he ever even say sorry? For bullying? For insulting someone? For literally anything? Has anyone ever heard him say sorry? Words seemed to die in Midoriya's throat and he frowned, looking away. No. But it's different. He doesn't see the value in words, they're just things people can throw around with no meaning. He's more about actions. If he means something, he'll make up for it. He isn't one to just say sorry and expect everything in the world to be right again. Mineta sighed from where he was sitting on his desk. Dude, kinda sounds like you're making excuses now, you know? Not really helping your case. Most of the class, including Midoriya and his friends, snapped simultaneously by habit, Shut up, Mineta. He grumbled to himself and huffed in his seat. Okiko sighed. As much as I hate agreeing with the grape, he's right, Midoriya. You're just making excuses for him, now. They aren't excuses, they're actual things that you'd know about if you actually tried to understand. There isn't anything to understand, Midoriya. Bakugou deserves punishment for his wrongdoings whether you'll accept it or not. He already has received punishment. Midoriya yelled, quirk flickering along his skin in response to his anger. The classroom was so quiet you could probably hear a pin drop. A beat passed. Midoriya sighed and turned, walking back to his seat tiredly. He glared at her out of the corner of his eye after flopping into it. He already has received punishment, Uraka, far worse than you think, he repeated quietly. I won't tell you what, and I'm not completely sure about everything yet, but I do know he's been through enough as it is. So please, just drop it. Midoriya was wrong. Okiko frowned, meeting his glare with her own. You're living in a dream, Midoriya. You'll have to wake up at some point. He scoffed, turning to face the wall at the front of class. No. I'm pretty sure you're the one dreaming, Uraka. You may think you're being the hero, but at best, you're the villain, here. The class decided it was probably time to get back to work and do what they were supposed to before Aizawa came back. Everyone went back to their seats, and Okiko, after a minute of thinking, sat back down slowly. Midoriya was the cleverest person she knew. If he was being so persistent about this, then maybe there was some kind of truth to his words that wasn't just held up by some pointless idolization from childhood. Okako was doing the right thing. But now, she wasn't quite sure anymore. Times. I don't wanna be alone. I don't wanna be alone. When it ends. Don't wanna let you know. I don't wanna be alone. Golden, by Harry Styles. Times. Katsuki was lucky. That's all he was told from the age of 5. Kaken, you're so lucky you have such a great quirk. Said quirk is making him lose his hearing and gave him a concussion the first time he used it by accident, but yeah. He was lucky, how would he be enough to people without it? Bakugou, you're so lucky, you're so smart. He studied until his eyes and head hurt nearly every night in fear of failing, but that was okay. That was just luck. You know effing what, Katsuki? You're lucky you have such good parents as us. Stop being so effing ungrateful. The hag was right, of course. It was hard to get on their good side most days without risking a beating and yelling, but at least it was still there. He was luckier than most kids for that opportunity. The thing was, though, that some of the time he didn't agree with them, didn't like it when they called him lucky. After all, he didn't feel very lucky when he cried to himself in secret. He didn't feel very lucky when he'd wake up from nightmares after an hour of sleep and not gain another wink before sunrise. He didn't feel very lucky when he felt like giving up most days and just stop existing. There were 1,000 other instances where he just didn't feel lucky. But they couldn't see that. Those oblivious, naive people didn't see that. So he wouldn't let them. He'd hide it all and agree with them and bottle everything up. He'll keep all those emotions right there and then one day, he'll die. However, lately, he'd been doing an awful lot of bottling up. And in the middle of lunch, when he'd been thrown a piece of fruit at and he'd walked out of the cafeteria with both hands flipped, that bottle was struggling to contain all those feelings. He'd decided to go to a training room and take his mind off of things. Halfway through his workout, someone approached him. He scowled when he saw who it was. The one guy, save perhaps Midoriya, who probably thought with the strongest belief that Katsuki was the luckiest guy on earth with his quirk. Yeah, Katsuki remembered him. God, and he'd just been thinking about how much he hated people thinking he was effing lucky. The universe had it in for him. Spoiler, it was actually the author who loves to have it in for him, but in a fond way, of course. Isn't that great? F off, eye bags, Katsuki scowled, focusing on his punching bag as the purple-haired guy leant against the wall nearby, sipping on a bottle of water. Why aren't you eating in the cafeteria with the rest of your class? Shinso asked, eyeing him out of the corner of his eye. Katsuki's jaw locked. None of your effing business. PSS off. Shinso sighed with a frown. Thought you'd say that. It's true what they say, isn't it? The Class A beast. It seems to be a very fitting name, after all. Shut up, Katsuki snapped at him and punched the bag harder. You don't know what the F you're talking about. Actually, I do have an idea, Shinso muttered bitterly. Rumors spread fast in my class when the only entertaining thing you've got is watching the hero course improve. The whole you bullied Midoriya in middle school thing? Spread like wildfire. Katsuki stopped punching abruptly and wrinkled his nose, eyes burning holes into the punching bag before him. You have 5 seconds to shut the hell up before I blow your effing face off. The thing is, though, Shinso continued, ignoring Katsuki, it's crazy how easily your classmates turned on you. More surprisingly, I don't get what happened to you and Kirishima. You guys were the closest, didn't he try to stand up for you or something? Or did that happen and soon he found there was no point to it anyway so left you? Okay, that stung. What the F are you trying to do, eyebags? Katsuki snarled, finally turning to him. Wanted to get some gossip for your class or something? Newsflash, a-hole, I'm not the gossip girl around here. Shinso rolled his eyes and lolled his head towards Katsuki lazily. And you take me for the guy who shares the gossip? Look at me and tell me that you do. Katsuki scowled. Then what do you effing want from me? Shinso's jaw clenched and his eyes narrowed slightly in quiet anger. I just don't really like bullies like you, honestly. Especially not one who's in the hero course despite it. Oh, now he saw what this was all about. Effing hell, couldn't anyone learn how to keep their long butt noses out of his business? At this point he's surprised they can't smell their own bullshit. But it hurt that even someone who was in an entirely different course than him knew he was shit too. Maybe everyone did. Maybe no one ever actually believed in him in the first place. Katsuki clicked his tongue sharply. TCH. If you're just gonna tell me how much of a effing villain you think I am, effing PSS off. I've heard it enough times to effing get it, I'm not enough to be a hero. That effing good enough for you? That what you wanted to effing hear? Shinso looked taken aback. Katsuki gave him one last glare and turned to go over to the weightlifting area. He'd only lifted his first weight 5 times before Shinso approached him again. He snarled in frustration, putting down the weights, hands sparking. What the F is it this time, eyebags? Shinso rolled his eyes and jutted his thumb at the clock hanging from the wall in one corner. Classes start soon. Thought I should tell you, 'cause Aizawa's gonna come through this door any second and if he sees you, he'll give you a detention or something for being late to class. And how would you fucking know that? 'Cause he's training me, Shinso frowned. I wasn't joking when I said I'd become a hero, before. Katsuki smirked. He liked this guy, didn't seem to give up or roll over when things get tough, unlike some other cowards. And when he said something, he meant it. That was something Katsuki could respect. Obviously, he'd never admit that out loud. That would be effing stupid. Was all he said, grabbing his things and walking towards the door. Give it your all then. Make it fucking count. He was nearly out the door when Shinso called out to him again. Oi, Bakugou. Katsuki paused, willing to carry on as soon as things went south. Do you know what my quirk is? Shinso asked. Katsuki scoffed, turning to face him. What, you think I got effing dementia? Of course I do, mind F dashed. Shinso snorted. And knowing this, you're replying to me. Yeah, no sheet, that's how a effing conversation works, dickhead, Katsuki said, rolling his eyes. If you were gonna control me, first off, that's against school rules, so you'd get into sheet. Second, I'd blow your effing face off. And thirdly, what the F would you even need to use it for? It's not like I'm gonna effing lie or try and get away. I'm not a effing wimp. Shinso grinned. It was creepily similar to Aizawa's. You swear a lot. F you, Katsuki called as the door shut slowly behind him, flipping the boy off over his shoulder. Plus, Aizawa walked into the gym less than 5 minutes later, bearing a confused look. I just saw Bakugou walking back from here. Did something happen? Did he do something to you? Hitoshi frowned. No. Why? His mentor sighed and sat on one of the benches. I heard a day or two ago that he bullied Midoriya in middle school. We can't expel him, because it happened in a different school, but... Well, I don't know. I feel like I need to make sure nothing is, well, continuing from then, if you get what I mean. Hitoshi looked down, tracing his finger over grooves in his water bottle absent-mindedly. Well, he didn't seem as bad as people make him out to be. As what people think of him. As what I thought he was like. Aizawa lifted an eyebrow, out of his sight. And by that, you mean? The boy glanced at him, hesitating, before looking away. Actually, it's nothing. Just, I think that maybe. No. Nothing. I'll let you know if I see anything, though. The dark-haired man hummed to himself, eyeing his student thoughtfully. All right. Now then, let's get started on stretches. And so the conversation ended and their training started. But Hitoshi continued to think about Bakugou. He felt as if he didn't really know the blonde. Of course, he'd thought he had. He'd thought that all there was to him were things like anger, bitterness, cockiness, selfishness, confidence, brutality, things along those lines. Those were all he displayed, so why should he think differently? But that was the thing. It was all he displayed to the open, not what he really was inside. Hitoshi could say a similar thing about himself. He came off as blunt, quiet, probably bitter, and, as much as he says otherwise, though his classmates continued to tease him emo. But on the other hand, he cooed over cats when they did literally anything and still had a fanboy-level idolization for Eraserhead. He still got excited every time he spoke to him, he'll have to admit, so that should say quite a bit on who he really was underneath. He remembered Bakugou's words. If you're just gonna tell me how much of a effing villain you think I am, effing PSS off. I've heard it enough times to effing get it, I'm not enough to be a hero. It reminded him too much of the things he'd once said to his bullies, before UA. It had made him pause, and actually think. At the time in middle school, he just wanted someone to look below the surface and see he wasn't a villain. See he wasn't a monster, or some freak. Tried to tell them that, even though it always fell on deaf ears. And yet, Hitoshi had done just the opposite to Bakugou a few minutes ago. It didn't even matter if there was nothing under the surface worth looking for. It mattered that Hitoshi would at least have tried looking in the first place, because now, well, Hitoshi was betting something really was hiding behind that hot-headed exterior. The thing was that Hitoshi felt like he should have known this. As if it was just common knowledge that Bakugou wasn't just angry and mean. And it really should be, he thought. Because you could see it in the way he did things. Or used to do things, considering most of the chances to show it were taken away from him, now. For example, the way he'd let Kirishima hang off of his shoulder as they walked through corridors whenever the usual extrovert seemed tired, and tried to tone his aggressiveness down a level. Or the way in training rooms, he'd shoot words and sentences between attacks that would bring a spike in his opponent's confidence and pride, things like, not too bad of a hook, or, Jesus Christ, since when could you fucking do that? Maybe when Hitoshi would see him and his close group of friends walk to class from the dorms, Bakugou quizzing them along the way and them beaming when they got every question right. Them exclaiming that they are confident about the upcoming test before he'd shoot them encouraging quips hidden by a blanket of anger or light teasing. It was the little things that made Bakugou I'll kill you all Katsuki seem so nice to be around, even though Hitoshi hadn't really realized it up until now. The way he secretly cared, secretly worried, secretly encouraged. Had he secretly cried? Hitoshi was just beginning to put the pieces together that there was more to the blonde than what so many people wrongly thought, and he'd only really had, what, 2 interactions with him? One of them wasn't even direct, just a warning from Hitoshi that he'd transfer into the hero course whether they'd like it or not. That, and his short observations from afar, really wasn't much. He wasn't exactly liking the fact that Class A had over a year with him and still turned on him, after his thinking. Sure, Hitoshi might not know everything they do, but, well, even then. 2 wrongs don't make a right. The hero class shouldn't be acting like that regardless, and he will admit with a raised chin that he felt shameful of targeting Bakugou earlier, even if he just didn't understand yet at the time. Hitoshi inwardly sighed. God, he really didn't want to question whether or not hero society was as perfect as people made it up to be again. He knew it was bad. That didn't mean he wanted to know how bad it was exactly. Something told him he'd be debating and arguing inside his head instead of sleeping that night. Again. F insomnia. Times. Come a little closer, then you'll see. Come on. Things aren't always what they seem to be. Come on. Do you understand the things that you've been seeing? Come on. Come a little closer, by Cage the Elephant. Times. He already has received punishment, Uraraka, far worse than you think. That's what Midoriya had said. He already has received punishment, was what it was. Far worse than you think. A hero was just lost at this point. Not confused, not angry, not worried, lost. Because, at the start of their first year he'd thought that Bakugou was one of the manliest people he knew. Strong, brave, powerful, the things he looked up to and respected. But then came the whole situation. And everything he knew about the blonde got turned on its head. A hero had heard of it all first from Kaminari. They, the self-dubbed Baku Squad, had been hanging in his room. Bakugou had been busy, so he wasn't there, when Kaminari frowned and told them about some things he'd overheard from Todoroki talking to Uraraka and Ida that was bothering him. So, guys? You know how Bakugou and Midoriya don't get along that well, he remembered Kaminari telling them, nails between his teeth in anxiousness and eyes downcast. I heard some stuff from Midoriya's group of friends earlier, while I was walking past. Midoriya wasn't there, but they were saying stuff like they can't believe Bakugou could do such a thing and that they should have known Bakugou was a bully to Midoriya. I don't want to believe it. But what if Bakugou isn't who we think he is? Obviously, at first they'd rejected the idea. Bakugou? Their friend? A bully? No, they must be mistaken. It was absurd. Bakugou could be angry and rude and brash but they couldn't find any solid reasoning. Any reasoning that had any real evidence behind it which wasn't just their bias. And he cares deep down was one of those unvalid reasons. That was the first time a hero wanted to punch Bakugou, not because of annoyance, not because of training, not because he was worried. Because he was finally PSS-effing mad at the blonde. After that, he became sure that he finally knew the blonde. Really knew him, not just the cheap view of what a hero wanted him to be. He grew cold towards Bakugou. Never spat mean words or tried to trip him over in corridors or anything like that, but he wasn't very kind either. Each accidental eye contact was immediately hardened with a glare from a hero. If they walked too close, his shoulder would roughly shove against his. When Bakugou tried to sit at their usual table, he tried not to start a fight and instead coldly explain that they didn't have enough room, despite the obvious spaces they had filled with their bags and legs. Not seeing a flash of hurt on Bakugou's face. Not seeing his hands clench. That went on for, 3 or 4 weeks. A hero wasn't sure, but that was enough time to come to his senses that Bakugou Katsuki was not who he wished he was and never could be, at this rate. Until Midoriya had confronted his friends in front of his classmates a day ago and said those words. He already has received punishment, Uraraka, far worse than you think. Those words. Just sounds, really, silly things that hold too much power. The power to either crush someone's heart or lift it. The power to plant a seed of doubt in his head. A hero shared a wall with Bakugou. And the thing was, that no matter how a hero tried to chalk it up or say it some other way, it was clear Bakugou didn't have a good life, despite what so many people thought. Countless shouting matches to his parents. Countless nights sleepily hearing a soft bang and harsh breathing as the blonde woke from nightmares. Countless hissed, pained curses from quirk overuse or injures in training he'd insisted he could take care of without recovery girl. Countless nights listening to his hitched breaths and muffled sobs. Maybe no one else was swayed by those silly, little words. But then again, maybe no one had been as close to Bakugou as a hero had been, either. Now, this didn't mean he was ready to forget that Bakugou was a bully. He wasn't about to throw that out of the window and say it was okay just because Bakugou didn't have the perfect life. But it did make him think. Think that maybe Midoriya had a point after all. And yet still, he wasn't sure. He wanted to talk to Midoriya himself at some point too, just so that he could see what exactly Midoriya was trying to say before doing something stupid. Although, who knew if Midoriya would even want to talk to him? Being his tormentor's best friend, he ignored a whisper in his head wondering if Bakugou had ever really thought that about him, couldn't have made Midoriya very fond of him, right? He would wait and observe. So until he decided otherwise, Bakugou would still be on their blacklist. Words echoed in a hero's head. He already has received punishment, Uraraka, far worse than you think. But just how much punishment had he really gone through, unseen to a hero? Plus, it turned out Izuku was the one to ask Kirishima for a talk first. Hey, Kirishima! Izuku called out to him, rushing after the group after class. Sorry to bother you, but could I talk to you for a second? Kirishima glanced at Ashido, Kaminari, and Zero, before shrugging and grinning at him. Sure thing, Midobro. I'll catch you guys later, go on without me. His friends gave him a smile and shrugged, continuing to walk down the path. Izuku watched them go thoughtfully. The ex-Baku squad. I actually had hope for them, too. Damn it, how did it all turn so horrible so quickly? Kirishima turned to Midoriya with a smile. I actually wanted to talk to you too for a while, but I wasn't sure if, well, stuff. Izuku frowned in confusion. Here? Oh no, I hope I wasn't acting too grumpy or unapproachable or anything. I didn't mean to, I was just a little angry at my friends, that's all. But if you needed something, I'm so sorry you felt like you couldn't talk to me. Please, if you ever need anything, feel free to ask. He knew he had been acting, grumpy for the past few days. Since the talk with Uraraka, he'd been so frustrated that he hadn't really thought about it when he glared or snapped at people a little. It was just so infuriating that his friends couldn't take him seriously. Obviously, if Kirishima had wanted to talk to him and felt he couldn't approach him, he should really make sure he wasn't being so harsh. The last thing he wanted was people thinking he wouldn't want to help them. To his relief, Kirishima just smiled sheepishly and waved his hand. No. You've got it wrong. Don't worry, that's not your fault. I just wasn't sure if I should bring the subject into conversation or not, considering a few things lately. Nothing to do with your behavior, though. Izuku practically deflated. The reason why he'd asked to speak to Kirishima, completely forgotten. Oh, phew, that's a relief. I'm really glad. But, if you don't mind, what was that subject? I'm pretty sure I won't get mad, or sad, or whatever you're expecting. Just kinda curious. Kirishima looked away, lips pursed. It's about Bakugou. Izuku sighed. If I hear anything about how I'm some kind of victim and he's the abuser, I swear to All Might. No, don't worry, it's not about that. Kirishima rushed to assure. He paused. Well, actually, it kinda is. But not really. Look, I'll talk to you later about it, but I think you're getting off track. Was there something you wanted to talk about? Izuku blinked. Oh, right. Actually, it's about Kaken too. Oh, Kirishima said. So, well, do you want to start or should I, 'cause we might be talking about? You start, Izuku said with finality. He usually was quite indecisive when it came to telling people what to do. It made him feel like he was bossing them around and he didn't want to force anyone to do anything. But right then, he needed to hear what Kirishima said before he said anything himself. The whole conversation would be pointless if Kirishima had already made up his mind about Bakugou. Kirishima seemed to look at him with a calculating gaze, so Izuku made sure his face was as blank and normal as it could be to avoid giving anything away. The other side, shrugging. Okay, if you say so. Let's walk while we talk, though, otherwise we'll be here for a while and Aizao'll get mad. Izuku nodded and followed as they slowly strolled back to the dorms. Kirishima gathered his thoughts before beginning. I've been wanting to ask you about this since, Bakugou had been taken to see the principal. Remember? Izuku nodded. When he'd come back into the classroom like nothing happened, if anything, even more confident, Bakugou had been met with a shocked and angry class. He remembered when Ida had shot up from his seat, hands straight up, demanding to know why a bully was still allowed in UA, much less the hero course. Or when Uraraka had scowled and tried to convince Aizawa that keeping Bakugou in there was a bad idea for them, future heroes. When most of the class had joined her. It had honestly made him angry and repulsed. But staring at the back of Bakugou's head, he had known he shouldn't make any moves this time. Couldn't, unless he wanted to damage their friendship further. You think I'm effing blind, too? I see when you try and defend me against everyone or reason with people to effing leave me alone. I don't effing need that. I can handle on my own without you making me the damsel in effing distress. He'd felt useless, but if that was what Bakugou wanted, well, that was just going to have to happen, and Izuku would let it. He didn't want to be those people Bakugou didn't trust, all because they didn't listen to his wants, didn't listen when he said no. There were already way more people than there should be in that category, Izuku was aware. He was ripped out of his thoughts when Kirishima continued speaking. Well, what you said. It kinda stuck with me. The thing about him already having received punishment. You're probably one of the few people who knows Bakugou better than me, so. Well, I share a wall with him, That, and the fact that I've known him for a while too, makes me kinda aware of how his life isn't as perfect as he makes it out to be. I'm sure you know that too, right? Izuku's eyes widened and he looked at Kirishima, who had already been trying to observe his reaction. Izuku smiled slightly. So, did Kirishima finally get it? Did someone finally understand? Exactly. Kirishima smiled, hand reaching up to the nape of his neck. Good, I was worried for a second that I'd misinterpreted your words and ended up offending you. The thing is, though, I wasn't sure how to move forward with it. I mean, he sighed. I may have used to have been somewhat close to him, not that it really mattered to him, apparently, but you know the most about him. I wanted to hear what you have to say about him yourself and without interruptions before making assumptions and trying to talk to him. Izuku frowned and looked away again. Well, first off, I can tell you that as much as you try to think the opposite, you really did matter to him. You meant the world to him. You were the one person he trusted. Nearly as much as himself. Kirishima frowned. You think so? I know so, Kirishima, Izuku replied. I don't know how everyone's suddenly forgotten everything about him as if you never knew him, but the facts are still there that he used to care so much about you guys. You, Ashido, Kaminari, Zero, everyone, meant the world to him, because you guys, even if unknowingly, gave him a chance. You guys made him better. Kirishima was quiet. Izuku sighed, seeing the dorm building neared quickly. Anyway. I guess I'll just get down to what I really wanted to say. Kirishima, I want you to talk to Kaken. Just hear him out, okay? That's all I ask. That you at least try to hear him out, if not for him, for me. Kirishima frowned. I don't think anything makes what he did to you alright, still, Midoriya. But, well. Okay. Yeah, okay, I'll do it then. If you insist. As soon as I get the chance, I'll do it. Thank you. It was quiet for a while as they walked up to the entrance door, where they could hear people chatting and laughing inside. Kirishima paused. What you said? How I used to mean the world to him. Yeah. It's obvious in the way he used to look at you guys, Izuku explained with a wistful smile. It's how he used to look at me, or people like Aizawa and All Might, P. platonically of course. He added when Kirishima gave him a look and his ears tinted red. It's full of care and protectiveness, like he'd choose your life over his any day if needed. Don't tell him I said that, though. Or anyone. If this finally blows over, he'll never forgive me for that. He chuckled. He didn't mention how he'd thought the look Bakugou gave him when they were little was slowly coming back recently, until, of course, the whole situation started. That might just have been pushing it, he admitted. Kirishima looked a little troubled. He muttered. Used to. Izuku looked away with a frown. Yeah. I don't think it'd be easy to trust someone and love them like you used to do when they stab you in the back. Do you? He looked conflicted, and Izuku almost felt bad. Almost. Izuku sighed and stepped forward, twisting the doorknob. Think about what I said. Give him a second chance. Please. Have a good night, Kirishima. And with that, he opened the door, making a beeline to his room. He heard people welcome Kirishima when the door shut behind them and pursed his lips. God, he hoped Kirishima would listen. Times. Get a load of this monster. He doesn't know how to communicate. His mind is in a different place. Will everybody please give him a little bit of space? Get a load of this train wreck. His hair's a mess and he doesn't know who he is yet. But little do we know, the stars welcome him with open arms. This is home, by Cavetown. Times. The next day, everything was normal. Katsuki got dressed, went on a run, then headed for school. There, he proceeded to ignore everyone around him, especially Kirishima. Not looking at him helped with getting over the pain in his chest, until it finally hit lunchtime. There was just one thing. He'd woken up feeling like he wanted to curl right up again and stay there for eternity. How wonderful, right? Crazy how something as weak as feelings could do that to someone barely 5 minutes into their day. It was for no reason, too. No, shut up, he was not affected by this whole thing. He was fine, he really was. He just felt so down. Once, when he was around 10, he'd been chopping vegetables for his parents' dinner and accidentally cut himself pretty deeply. Only the next day, when someone had asked about the bandages, did he realize, oh shit, he nearly cut his pinky off. That's what this felt like. That oh shit moment where everything you'd either forgotten about or wanted to shove away decided to crash onto you, way later than it had first happened, and rub in your face, leaving you no space to breathe. Naturally, Katsuki told himself to seck it up, not be a coward, and get on with the day. At lunch, however, he decided he couldn't put up the front anymore and made his way to the roof. That should be away from everyone, and quiet, right? He'd get a breather, finally. He walked up to the railings and looked out at the city below them. Wind pulled and pushed at his hair and clothes, softly blowing in his ears. He clenched his fists and sighed, closing his eyes and letting his mind quieten for a minute or two. After opening them, he thought for a moment, before cursing to himself. He'd forgotten to pick up some food before going up there. Shit, he scowled, turning and sitting against the railing, hand covering his eyes and legs drawn up to his chest lazily. A minute passed. Just him against the world, at that moment. Even the wind fell silent to his loud, deprecating thoughts. His stomach growled. He really should have gotten something from the cafeteria, or at least eaten breakfast that morning. He squashed the stray thought, wondering if he even deserved food. Katsuki jolted when someone sat next to him. Oh, effing great. It was Aizawa 2.0 again. He scowled, scrambling to put together an angry facade as quickly as possible, even if Shinso had definitely seen him like this, and opened his mouth to tell him ever so politely to leave. The curse words weaved in were just a sign of very, very mild annoyance from him, that's all. He froze, however, when a dumpling was held out to him. He blinked at it. What the F is that supposed to be? Shinso rolled his eyes. Take it. I don't have all day. Katsuki wrinkled his nose. I don't need your effing pity. No, but you do need to eat, because otherwise you're going to make finding a space in the hero course a hell of a lot easier for me, Shinso bit back with a frown. And anyway, I don't want to hear your stupid stomach grumbling almost as loud as you do normally. It's annoying. Usually, Katsuki would snap back angrily. But he was so tired and hungry. He took the dumpling. They sat in silence for a while. Shinso occasionally passed a few more dumplings over when he finished the current ones. Katsuki refused to meet his eye. God, he was so pathetic. Shinso sighed when his bento box was finished. I think class is starting soon. He stood up, dusting himself off a little. Katsuki immediately did the same, not wanting to experience the awkwardness that was bound to occur if he stayed sitting. There weren't any goodbyes, or thank yous or emotional statements shared. But Katsuki preferred it that way anyway as they separated when re-entering the building. The dumplings had been good. Plus, the next day, Katsuki went to the rooftop again. He spotted the mop of purple hair almost immediately, sitting against the side of the staircase wall with bento box in hand. He was just beginning to open it. Oi, eyebags, Katsuki barked, walking up to him. Shinso frowned up at him, pausing. Katsuki threw a bento box at him. Here? What's this? Shinso asked, turning it over in his hands after catching it in surprise. Effing food, what did you think it was? Katsuki scowled, leaning against the wall and refusing to make eye contact. Shinso gave him a confused look and opened it, sniffing it as if it might hold some kind of poison. Why? He asked, shooting a suspicious look as he lowered the box. Katsuki huffed. I don't owe you shit, now. And if you tell anyone about what happened yesterday, I'll explode your effing face off. Shinso snorted, as if he knew there was something else going on. Yeah, right. Sure. Well, you'd better sit down, Explodo. I'm not eating all this myself. The blonde scoffed, though he sat down too. Never said you effing could. I'm taking some too, dickface. And don't effing call me that. Shinso shrugged, suits you. He put down Katsuki's box and placed his own next to it, silently telling Katsuki he could share some of his too. Still, Katsuki didn't take any from Shinso's. No, it effing doesn't, Katsuki scowled, taking some onigiri he'd made from his bento box. On the other hand, eyebags, or dickface describes you fucking perfectly. Have you effing seen yourself? I'll have you know these are Gucci bags, a-hole, Shinso muttered, mostly just talking without really thinking as he took some onigiri from Katsuki's box too. As he took a bite, the blonde grinned and took pride as his eyes widened. Did you take this from lunch rush or something? Are you his favorite? Shinso asked, staring at the onigiri. Katsuki scowled. What? No, dickwad, I effing cooked it. What, you fucking don't like it or some shit? No, Shinso shook his head with a snicker, just didn't know you could cook. Yeah? Well now you effing know, then, asshat. It was quiet as they ate in silence. Shinso said eventually, it's actually good, though, to be honest. Katsuki grinned. Obviously. I effing cooked it. He was pleased. He didn't realize how long it had been since someone genuinely complimented him on something other than his academics or fighting. Plus, Hitoshi was happy with himself. Sort of. We don't talk about the heap of insecurities and problems he was currently ignoring. He wasn't sure why he'd shared his lunch with Bakugou that first day he'd arrived on the rooftop. But he was glad he had, because now Bakugou seemed to be warming up to him. Even if he wasn't, shush up, he was. It wasn't every day they both sat on the rooftop. Bakugou would still sometimes eat in the cafeteria, a whole table to himself, and so would Hitoshi at times, especially if it was cold. So no, they didn't always meet each other on the rooftop or in training rooms. But every time they did, it was comfortable to eat beside each other. One day, Hitoshi was sitting by the railings this time. Bakugou slammed the door open. Ah, so a bad day, then. He stormed over to Hitoshi and flopped himself next to him with force, crossing his arms over bent legs. Hitoshi raised an eyebrow. The hell? Mind your own effing business, Bakugou snapped. Hitoshi sighed and shrugged. If he wanted to talk, he would. They'd been sitting next to each other for, collectively 2 weeks now? He liked to think Bakugou felt at least semi-comfortable with him. Sure enough, a while later, Bakugou began. So, apparently, effing shitty H. The redhead extra from my class wanted to fucking talk to me. For a while now, he said, but apparently there were no effing opportunities lately. So, naturally I told him to effing PSS off. He doesn't effing deserve that from me. Yeah, then what? Hitoshi asked when he paused. Did something worse than usual happen or some shit? He said that I effing owe it to him, after all this effing time, Bakugou spat. That I effing owe it to him. I don't owe shit to him. I might have been a effing shit person, still am, but they're supposed to be heroes in training, not effing karma itself. Hitoshi frowned, putting his lunch down. Well, first off, don't say that. Say effing what? Because I'll effing fight you on. Say that you're a sheet person, Hitoshi said, maintaining eye contact. Bakugou paused. Because you're not. I've had multiple lunches with you for the last 2 weeks and I really, honestly doubt you are. So stop saying that shit to yourself because soon you'll believe it, and that won't be good. Bakugou clicked his tongue and looked away. Hitoshi shook his head with a groan. Ooh, don't tell me they've already gotten to you. Effing PSS off, Bakugou scowled. It seemed to lack the usual bite. As if you could do much better if you were in my shitty effing shoes. You're right, I didn't. The insomniac was determined to keep his eyes forward, fixed on the stairwell's walls. Hitoshi sighed, looking up to see the clouds drifting lazily past. Never mind. Look, if someone called me villainous or a sheet person, would that be okay? Bakugou clicked his tongue. I know what you're doing, and it's not going to effing work. Just answer the DMN question, Hitoshi said. Truthfully, would it be okay? He narrowed his eyes. Of course effing not. Why? Bakugou whipped his head around to look at Hitoshi, frustrated. What the F are you getting at, dipshit? This is going effing nowhere. It's literally one question, Hitoshi said, all you have to do is answer it. Because you're effing not. Bakugou snapped. You effing. You're just not. It's a sheet thing to say anyway. Okay. Hitoshi furrowed his brows. So why do you think them saying it to you is an exception? Where the hell did you get that bullshit from? Hitoshi turned to look at Bakugou. He was taken aback to see clenched, shaking hands. Isn't it effing obvious? The blonde said. Because what if they're effing right? Oh, shit, Hitoshi thought, speechless. This sounds way too familiar. Hitoshi grimaced. You. The bell rang distantly, signaling the end of lunch and cutting off Hitoshi. They both froze for a moment. Bakugou stood up, hesitating for a second before walking towards the stairs, head face down and shoulders hunched slightly. He swung the door open, pausing. If you tell anyone about what just happened, I'll explode your effing face off, he warned, before taking a deep breath, lifting his chin and rolling his shoulders back as if nothing had happened. And he left. Times. It's like a movie, it's like a movie. It's not the real me, it's not the real me. Oh, maybe next time. But for now, I'll pretend that I am fake fine. Fake Fine, by Robert Grace. Times. The next day, the lunch hall was crowded. Well, at least, more than Katsuki was now used to. He'd been spending more time on the rooftop or in training rooms than he'd realized, even if he'd told himself not to be a coward and face those fuckers head on. How pathetic. It felt much more busy and claustrophobic than he'd thought. As he walked in, it was like all eyes turned to him, zoning in on what he was wearing, his face, his expression, his hair, the way he walked, the way he looked around, the way he breathed. It was tiring, exhausting, even, to be conscious of every little thing he did. Usually, he'd bask in the attention, smirk, grin, boast, become more confident in general, but now with a different meaning behind those prying eyes, it was a lot less encouraging. He still acted like his usual self, though. He couldn't afford to be a coward. And the thing was, he knew deep down that not everyone was staring at him. Why would they? Not when he sat down at his old table, or took out his bento box. Not even when he opened it. Was it just him, or was that louder than usual? Would that be taken as aggressive? Was that offensive in some way? Was he just proving to them that he was the villain they all knew he was? After all, continuing to stare would just be a waste of time and creepy. Logically, no one had enough interest to carry on. The eyes still seemed to burn into his every little move. Obviously, the only exception to that was his own class, Class 1A. They glared at him fiercely as they gathered their food from lunch rush or took out their own packed lunches, and he was pretty sure at some point one or two of his classmates swore at him and spat on his table as they walked by, which was replied to by an unimpressed, disgusted look by Katsuki. How heroic and respectful for school property, dear fuckwides. They turned red in embarrassment and huffed, moving on. Katsuki just continued to eat his food in peace. He went on his phone for a bit during it, ignoring how no one had bothered to message him since this whole fiasco started, save for maybe his mother demanding to know when he'd be coming back home, and made sure he had no undone homework as well as playing a few games. He ignored the non-existent stares. He also ignored the stares that were not so non-existent, yet he made sure they thought that to him they were, of course. Katsuki ate his food slowly, making sure every bite would only frustrate his classmates more as they all squashed together on just two. Meanwhile, he could stretch his legs over 2 seats, the whole table for himself. It was their loss, honestly. If they thought that they were achieving something or being heroic or whatever, they were miserably wrong. Although their teachers didn't know the extent of how their bullying childish grudge had gotten, Katsuki was mostly sure they'd just be disappointed to see it, although it was hard to decide on who it would be directed at. Katsuki, the villain, or his classmates, the heroes. Katsuki was just finishing off a guy in one of his games. It was beginning to get too easy for him. He might need to find some other, more challenging game soon, when he heard someone pause by his table opposite to where he sat today. He looked up with a glare. The F could they want? Class 1B's little brother himself, Monoma, regarded him with a sneer, still holding his lunch tray. Honestly, this is just getting quite the annoyance. Can't you Class A pushovers finally realize it's time to stop playing this childish game and just leave the rest of us in peace? Katsuki scowled. The F are you ranting about now, YA Goddamn extra? Monoma wrinkled his nose. Gosh. I'm talking about how you seem so entitled to take this whole table for yourself and expect us to deal with your class. I have over 5 of you spoilt scumbags on my usual table, and one of them is that little grapehead, who, I must say, is getting on my very last nerve. That's effing wonderful. Why are you telling me this? Katsuki scoffed. Not like I'm effing doing anything other than minding my own demon effing business. If you want them to move, not my effing problem. This table is completely effing free. I'm not effing stopping them, now am I? Tisich, Monoma turned his head away in distaste. Would it really kill you to stop that DMN colorful language? It's like you swallowed a pot. He sighed, elegantly seating himself as far away as possible to Katsuki, yet still on the same table. I guess I'll have to deal with your presence for the meantime, however. You better fix this problem of yours, though. I don't think I'll be able to refrain myself from hitting either you or one of your classmates if this keeps up. Katsuki snorted. That's gonna be pretty effing hard if you're going to be sitting next to that effing grapist. And that is exactly why I'll take my chances with the beast of Class 1A over the pervert of Class 1A, Monoma said dryly and picked up his chopsticks. Maybe you might have a sliver of hope left in you. Honestly, this would never happen with Class 1B. This only proves further how your class is so greatly inferior to us, if you simply cannot come to some silly agreement. This has been going on for over 4 weeks now. You all act like children. Katsuki clicked his tongue. Again, why the F are you telling me this? Not like I can do anything about it. Yes, Monoma rolled his eyes. But from what I hear, you were the bully, were you not? Shouldn't you apologize, at the least? It won't fix everything, but it might make things a little calmer around here, which would give me my DMN lunch table back and a break from those disgusting perverted remarks. Tisich, Katsuki scoffed, not bothering to say much else. Something in Monoma's eyes turned dangerous as he glared at him. You were a bully, Bakugou. Why? Katsuki paused eating. Why? He'd wanted Midoriya to stop following him. He'd wanted to keep his place as respected and on top. He'd wanted to show his parents he could be strong every time they'd be called into the principal's office or he'd come home with bruises on his knuckles. In the end, they were all stupid reasons, not really reasons. He shouldn't have done anything of the sort for such stupid excuses. He didn't even achieve a single one of them. He'd managed to stop Midoriya a little way into the first year, but that wasn't a product of bullying. That was just people telling him that maybe it wasn't right. And still, even with everything else, none of them had worked anyway. He'd lost that title of respected and on top as soon as he set foot in UA. And his parents never would, think he was strong or brave or clever or. It just hadn't worked. Monoma was right, he was childish to believe that the tactic could work all the way until the mature age of 14. Katsuki shook his head and sighed. I was a shitty person. I shoulda never done it, but what's done is done and the only way I can go now is effing forward. Not like I can change the effing past. Monoma seemed surprised. Then he leant back in his seat. Interesting. Katsuki scowled at the answer and continued to eat. He ignored how usually. He'd be yelling and demanding what the F this guy meant by just interesting. He'd been doing an awful lot of ignoring lately. At some point Monoma noted, that red-headed puppy of your class, Kirishima, right? Oh, I need to speak with you. Hey, men, don't say that. You owe this to us. You were the bully here. I'm only doing this 'cause me? I'm only trying this once, anyway. What the F about him? I don't give two sheets about any of them anymore. Yeah, well it seems he does about you, Monoma said dryly, giving him a look. I can see him staring at you from the other side of the cafeteria. Katsuki refused to turn around to look. You seem to love telling me things I'm not gonna do shit about. Monoma clicked his tongue. You don't need to listen if you don't care, you know. Honestly, I try to be nice by telling you and this is what I get. Such disappointment. Katsuki sighed, long, angry and tired. Why, of all people, did Monoma have to sit next to him now? If he was the beast of Class 1A, Monoma was the spoilt baby brother of Class 1B. And, to add the cherry on top, with Mineta on his table, the urge to dropkick him has never been so strong. Monoma was probably going to stay here from now on. Ooh. Oh, now this is interesting, Monoma grinned sadistically. Oh, goddamnit, what now, YA copycat fucker? Katsuki snapped. I'm trying to effing eat. Monoma just smiled wider and his eyes fixed on something behind Katsuki. Bakugou, Kirishima said from behind him. I think we need to try this talking thing again. Oh, for FS sake. Times. I just wanna be somebody to someone, oh. I wanna be somebody to someone, oh. I never had nobody and no road home. I wanna be somebody to someone. Someone to you, by banners. Times. Katsuki considered making a run for it, completely forgetting about his lunch and just booking it. But, he thought with an inward sigh, that was probably what was to be perceived as running from his problems. And Katsuki may be many things, but he was not a effing wimp who ran away from stupid problems. Most of the time, anyway. Katsuki sighed, putting his chopsticks down. Can I at least finish my DMN effing food? I'd rather do this now, actually, Kirishima said. Katsuki stood up, frustrated, and turned to finally look at the other boy. If he didn't know any better, he'd say the red-haired guy seemed nervous, maybe guilty. But he did know better. He could see through the stupid act. Honestly, this would never happen with Class 1B. This only proves further how your class is so greatly inferior to us, if you simply cannot come to some silly agreement. This has been going on for over 4 weeks now. You all act like children. Monoma's words from earlier rang in his ears, and he clenched his jaw. He gave a mildly sad look to his bento box before closing it and shoving it into his bag. Kirishima perked up a little and followed him as they weaved between people and out of the cafeteria. He wasn't betting on this conversation being useful, but maybe, if he listened for once, instead of lashing out and being angry all the time, well, maybe that would be the right move. Might even put a stop to this, at least briefly, and would give Monoma his table back so that he could continue to eat lunch in peace without the guy yammering in his ear. And anyway, wasn't there a saying or something about how? God, what was it again? For a relationship to work, effort from both sides is required? Granted, Katsuki was pretty sure that it was supposed to be for romantic relationships. Although, he was also pretty sure it was true that both sides have to make an effort to fix a platonic friendship all the same. He couldn't just mope about and cry about how his classmates were dickheads at this point, especially now that Kirishima actually seemed to be trying to fix their friendship now. If Kirishima seemed to be trying, so should Katsuki. Even though the more reasonable thing that was happening was probably Kirishima trying to corner him so that he could tell him just how much. No. Shut the F up. They eventually reached an empty hallway, where Katsuki stopped and leant against the wall, seemingly uncaring. He stared at Kirishima. Kirishima looked away and fiddled with his fingers. A minute passed. Katsuki clicked his tongue, rolling his eyes. God effing damn it, you wanted to effing talk, didn't you? So effing talk. Whatever betrayal bullshit or some crap about him being a villain that Kirishima was bound to say, he'd deal with that when it came. Not like he hasn't heard it before. He just really wanted him to get a move on at this point, because firstly, he wasn't about to waste time. Secondly, he really just wanted to get this over with. And thirdly, it made the hurt easier to hide when the pain was quick. Alright, Kirishima said. Look. I'm sorry. Wait, what? I went about everything completely wrong before, Kirishima said, eyes searching for something in Katsuki's crimson ones. I never should have said that you owe me, that you owe us. I was frustrated, and I was hurt, and I was just so confused. I mean, those are really just silly excuses. I don't really get to make excuses right now. I mean, I doubt I should even get this chance to talk to you. Anyway. Can we try this again? Please? Kirishima seemed to just be rambling on and on now, searching for words quicker than he could say them. Like, our friendship? I know I don't deserve it. But I want to try to fix things. I regret doubting you, and I just wish so deeply that I could take everything back. It was really unmanly of me and I am so ashamed of my actions. Katsuki narrowed his eyes and thought for a moment quietly. Why are you even doing this? What? Why the F are you doing this? What the hell made you change your effing mind, huh? You decide you hate me. For, what, effing over 4 weeks, and then boom, overnight you realize what a effing a-hole you are, he scoffed. Oh, please. Give me a effing break. You just want to feel heroic, don't you? You want to try to fix things just so you can screw me over again, that it? Kirishima looked away, biting his lip. No, I thought about what my Doria has been saying. You know, about you, about everything. I realized it wasn't our place to judge. Teasich, Katsuki clenched his teeth and glared at the floor. I told that effing nerd not to stick up for me. I don't need him, his stupid help or his effing pity. I can do effing fine on my own, I'm not some effing damsel. He flicked his gaze towards Kirishima. And that means I don't effing need you either. I don't need anyone. So you might as well piss us off right now because I'm not falling for your stupid effing act. With that, Katsuki pushed off the wall, taking a step back towards the cafeteria. DMN, he was right. This was completely and utterly a waste of his time. He should have just stayed back over there and forgot all about this. Kirishima clenched his fists. Sorry, but I'm not giving up on you again. Katsuki paused. He slowly turned to meet his eye. Effing what now? You heard me, Kirishima said, voice becoming more assured and determined. He took a step towards Katsuki. I'm not giving up on you again. I'm not turning my back and I'm not walking away, because you are my friend. And friends don't just push friends away like I have. I may be a hell of a shitty friend, but I don't plan on making the same mistake twice. No, you don't effing get it, Katsuki growled, stepping towards him as anger flew through his body. You aren't my friend. You lost that title the moment you decided I was too effing villainous for you all. Kirishima pursed his lips, looking away. The hallway was silent. You aren't villainous, for the record, Kirishima said quietly. Or unheroic. Or a brute, or aggressive, or whatever the hell else you're hearing. Katsuki scoffed, yeah? No. Good luck with convincing yourself. We both know that's a lie. Kirishima whipped his head around so fast Katsuki was almost worried for his neck. Bakugou, wait, are you seriously? Okay, you know what, just effing shut up, Katsuki muttered, resuming his walk back. I don't want to hear any of your effing bullshit, so just piss us off and go eat with the rest of the fuckfaces. Fine, we'll address that whole problem later. But please, just listen to me. Kirishima cried, rushing to his side and walking with him. He didn't stop Katsuki but it seemed obvious he wanted to. Give me one good effing reason. Because I care about you and our friendship and I really don't want to give up on us. Not again, not ever. Kirishima exclaimed. Katsuki faltered, and Kirishima seemed to take that as a sign to continue. Bakugou, I know that you won't forgive me right away. And, I'm not asking for complete forgiveness or to suddenly gain back your trust and friendship. I could never, after what I've done. Kirishima bowed, palms flat against each other in front of him. Bakugou, I need you to know how sorry I am. I regret and am ashamed of my actions, I'm so sorry. Katsuki was taken aback. After a second, he clicked his tongue and turned his head away, ears burning ever so slightly. Stand up, you look like a effing idiot. Kirishima did it in a heartbeat, hopeful eyes searching Katsuki's. The blonde sighed. I don't effing forgive you. Kirishima deflated a little, pursing his lips. Yeah. I expected that. I didn't effing finish, a-hole, Katsuki snapped. I don't forgive you. But, if you actually effing mean all this, Kirishima nodded vigorously, then prove it to me. Show it, earn this, then maybe I'll consider being on good terms. Nowhere near friendship yet, though, dickhead, after what you've pulled. Kirishima beamed brightly. Thank you so much, Bakugou bro. You won't regret this, dude. Quit the names, I never said you could effing use that. Katsuki snapped as he continued trudging back towards the cafeteria. He didn't admit how it made his heart feel a little lighter to hear the familiar nickname. Kirishima shook his head, amused, as he fell into step. Whatever you say, Bakugou bro. Katsuki rolled his eyes. Oh, by the way, Kirishima said with a teasing smile, are you on friendly terms with Monoma? When did that happen? Tisuke, I don't give two sheets about effing copycat, Katsuki said, he's only sitting there and annoying the shit out of me because you effing DS are sitting on his table. And yet, I don't see him being warned off by you. Kirishima sing-songed. It's almost like you tolerate him. I thought you hated his guts. That was until he posed some good effing points about our shitty butt class, shitty high. Dickface, Katsuki muttered. He looked pointedly at Kirishima, who looked away with pursed lips. They soon arrived back at the cafeteria, and Kirishima fiddled with his fingers. So, do you think that maybe, possibly, perhaps? Spit it out, I don't have all effing day, Katsuki huffed. Can I sit with you? At the table? Kirishima asked. I know we aren't even technically on good terms yet, but, I just thought. Katsuki sighed, do effing whatever. But if you sit near me it's not gonna fucking look good to them. He frowned. I don't care. If they wanna look at me weird, so be it. Sometimes that's not all they do, though, and you'll become their target just as much as I, Katsuki thought bitterly. Fine. Suit yourself. Monoma lifted an eyebrow when they came over together. Katsuki glared at him, which only brought a smirk to the other's face as he launched into another tangent about how Class B were better than Class A. He ignored Katsuki when he pointed out no one else from Class B had made a move to get away from his classmates on Monoma's table. On the other side of the cafeteria, Midoriya noticed them and smiled. Times. I try to explain the good faith that's been wasted. But after an hour it sounds like complaining. Wait, don't go away, can I lie here forever? You say that I'm better, why don't I feel better? The universe works in mysterious ways. But I'm starting to think it ain't working for me. Doctor, should I be good? Should I be good this year? Karma, by AJR. Times. Kirishima Aijuru. Aijuru froze and turned at the mention of his full name. No one ever called him by his full name. Unless, obviously, he'd done something super bad. In which case only one of his mothers would use it, but he was just walking back to the dorms and that voice definitely was not his ma, nor his mum. It was Ashido. And she had the rest of the ex-Baku squad, right behind her. Hey, Mina, a hero said with a nervous smile, hand drifting to the nape of his neck. What? You, us, my dorm. Ashido ordered with a fierce glare, now. You know when your parent guardian is obviously mad but they're trying to be calm but in the end it's just way more terrifying and you feel like you've been caught doing something but you don't even know what that is? Yeah. That's how Aijuru felt. Sweaty palms and all. As soon as the dorm slammed behind them and they were locked into Ashido's bright pink room, the interrogation started. Kiri, what were you thinking? Ashido hissed, standing over him with crossed arms. Aijuru was sitting on her bed, with Kaminari on her desk chair and Zero laying on one of the beanbags she had. Why on earth did you sit at Bakugou's table? Aijuru looked away with a small frown. I really think. Honestly, yeah sure, I get that maybe the tables were a little cramped, but sitting there of all places was just, Ashido curled her fingers, shook them, then fisted them repeatedly, before waving her arms around in some kind of frustrated gesture. Just, why? Yeah, dude, I gotta say, Kaminari said with a pitying grimace, not very cool to eat lunch with a bully. How is he gonna understand that what he did was wrong if he doesn't get a taste of his own medicine? Aijuru huffed. But, see, that's where you're wrong. Kiri, look, Zero groaned, face down on the beanbag, never one for arguments. I get that you and Bakugou were close. Super close, even. But you gotta just accept that he isn't who you, who we all thought he was. Dude. He's so unheroic, I'm doubting how much potential Aizawa really saw in him. He's an unkind, villainous bully who doesn't even regret his actions, and the sooner we get him to either change or... You aren't villainous, for the record. Ha! Yeah, no. Good luck with convincing yourself. We both know that's a lie. Guys, will you just listen to me? Aizuru said, not as loud as shouting, yet close to it. They all silenced immediately. Ashido sighed and sat on another beanbag, opposite to Aizuru. I'm sorry, Kiri. It's just, I saw you sitting next to him, then being all friendly, and then acting like it was nothing. Think about how Midoriya must feel. I am thinking about how Midoriya feels, which is the whole reason why I approached him in the first place, Mina. Aizuru said, desperate to get his reasoning across and hopefully convince his friends, just like he had been convinced, that this was not the way to go about this stupid dispute. Kaminari's eyes widened. You're trying to make Mido feel bad. What? No. Aizuru cried hastily. Of course not, I could never. Then, now let me repeat what I said earlier, what the absolute hell were you thinking? About Midoriya's feelings? How is sitting next to his abuser since childhood for a good old friendly lunch supposed to be a good thing for him? Ashido looked like he just ran over a dog in front of her and said it was okay because the owner wouldn't mind. Which, okay, was probably how this looked from her and the other's perspective, but still, a little overdramatic. He was only doing the right thing, and this time he was certain about it. He sighed. It's a long story, but in short, I spoke with Midobro a few days ago. Remember when he asked to talk to me on the way back from class? Yeah. Anyway. He asked me to talk to Bakugou. What? Zero said, confused. But why? You'd know if anyone actually listened to him, Aizuru said, a sad crease between his eyebrows as he thought. I've had a lot of time to think, and with that comes noticing. I've seen how every time you guys, not just you, but when the whole class, say something mean about Bakugou, he gets this tired, resigned look. A sad, dim angry look. Like he tried so many times but each time amounts to nothing, so now he's just given up. Ashido sighed and shook her head sadly. If anything, this is just proof of how much Bakugou hurt him. There must have been countless times he's tried to do something only for Bakugou to knock him back down again. No, that's not the point here, Mina. Aizuru said. Don't you see? Bakugou isn't the problem. Neither is his and Midoriya's background or how shitty he used to be. In fact, the problem has practically nothing to do with them. Kaminari frowned. He seemed to be paying way more attention than he did in any class they had, as he usually did when matters of his friends arose. Aizuru would have smiled inwardly, if not for the situation, at how obvious it was that he cherished and cared for his friends. So, then, what is the problem? Kaminari asked. But Aizuru had a pretty good guess that deep down he knew. He sighed and pursed his lips, looking at the rug below his feet. We are. He was not interrupted again as he explained his thoughts. Plus, for the first time in weeks, Katsuki finally felt a flare of hope. Sure, when Shinso had actually seemed to, dare he say it, enjoy the blonde's company, a spark of hope had ignited. But Shinso didn't really know him very well. Not before all this, anyway. His old friends, however, they did. They'd seen him at his worst, at his best, or at least DMing close to them both, and they knew what a monster he really was inside. So, it was probably quite reasonable to say that as soon as Shinso figured it out, he'd leave too. It was why they were so quick to turn their backs, after all, right? That had to be it. They'd seen that disgusting, angry, cold interior and decided that he just wasn't worth it. They had just been waiting for the opportunity to leave him behind for perhaps ages now, and this whole situation was the perfect excuse. He couldn't blame this on anyone other than himself, it was completely his fault. But Kirishima had tried. He'd spoken to him. He'd told him he was sorry. He'd told him that he wasn't villainous, even if Katsuki, never mind. He'd sat at the same table for lunch, no matter how confused this made Katsuki. And he'd willingly stuck by him throughout the whole day, volunteering to be his partner other than Midoriya in science, and shooting him grins and smiles every time their eyes met like it was the start of the year again. Like everything was all right again. Obviously Katsuki knew that wouldn't happen so easily. Having everything go back to normal seemed impossible. He just couldn't picture his classmates smiling at him kindly instead of with hate, and laughing with him in joy instead of at him with taunts at the tip of their tongues. It just seemed weird, even if only 4 weeks had passed. And, naturally, Katsuki also knew even deeper that it was likely Kirishima had some ulterior motive. He'd been trying to figure it out all day, but it just didn't seem to make much sense. What was Kirishima getting from pretending to want to be friends with Katsuki? There was no benefit he could think of, only the downsides to being associated with him. Maybe it was so that he could flaunt to people how he'd managed to get in close to the beast of Class 1A without getting burnt. To show how Kirishima, manly, heroic, generous, kind, caring Kirishima, could get on the good side of even the most villainous person in the whole school. Look at me, I've tamed the beast. Of course, there was also the likely option that he was just waiting to gain Katsuki's trust again so that he could stomp on it right after. A buzzing in his pocket ripped him from his thoughts. He looked away from where Kirishima was being dragged into the dorms by Ashido, Kaminari, and Zero, what effing dumbass, quickly in his surprise and ripped his phone out. Incoming call, now. Mitsuki. His blood ran cold and it was a conscious effort to stop himself from abruptly stopping in the middle of the path in fear-shock. Shit. No, not now. This was not a good time to be called by her. With so many people in his class still trudging back around him. The yelling and insults were going to be embarrassing. He knew everyone had to deal with this, except for, of course, Midoriya's weird butt mother, of whom he still found confusing, but it didn't mean he liked the looks he was given every time people heard those insults and shouts. It was why he yelled back usually. It stopped him from appearing too weak, even if the hits later on hurt like a beach. Again, this was not a good time. Then again, it never really was, since he always hated talking to her, so maybe he should just get this over with and deal with it. Katsuki accepted the call. Katsuki! I've been calling for effing ages now, what were you even effing doing? He scowled. I was in class, hag. I only got out 2 effing minutes ago. And anyway, you were only effing calling for 5 DMN seconds. Enough time for you to effing pick up, you useless brat. Mitsuki shouted. She took a calming breath, the kind that didn't really help calm her anyway but was meant for the only purpose to unsettle you. And unsettle him it did. I can't deal with your shit right now, Katsuki. When are you coming back, brat? I'll come when I effing come, Katsuki muttered. He knew his mother must be getting restless with the long amount of time gone without letting out her anger at someone other than her colleagues at work. It only made him all the more hesitant to go back, though. It meant when he did go back to that house, he'd have to be very careful around his parents if he wanted to get out of there less injured than need be, which was usually quite a lot anyway. But he could take it. What kind of weak but pathetic hero couldn't? That's not a effing answer and you know it. Katsuki could picture her snarl as she spat, you ungrateful piece of shit. Give me effing dates, brat. He pulled his phone away from his ear a little as the volume got a little too loud. I don't have to give you shit. Katsuki scowled. I don't effing know. Haven't been paying attention to the effing weeks lately. I'll ask my. You better effing find out soon then. And you better be coming home quickly. I don't want you bothering all those poor kind people a second more than you can, got it? Katsuki sighed silently. As usual, making him feel like the unwanted villain was the norm whenever it regarded him and other people. Wanted him to know how much of a chore having him as a kid was for them. Wanted him to know they were being good people by not abandoning him. Obviously, Katsuki knew she was just covering up the fact that she wanted him back to be her punching bag. The one to take her anger which came in the form of hating words spun into insults, or the form of fists and kicks meant to harm. Her insults meant nothing, really. This year was the longest he'd ever spent away from them, and although for the most part it was the best time he'd had in years, he should have known it wouldn't last. It hadn't been for the previous holidays or half-terms spent away from school, so it'd make sense that the next school break would be the same. So, yeah, the time he'd spent away from them was only an outlet for her anger gone for that time. It wasn't like her words were actually true. Not like he'd believe her. Still, though, with what everyone had been telling him lately, he shook his head to throw away that train of thought. That's what I was effing saying, you hag, if you'd let me effing talk. Katsuki snapped. He was glad she wasn't physically there, because usually that would earn him a whack. I'll ask my effing teacher, Happy. Don't talk to your effing mother like that, brat. Mitsuki yelled, the audio crackling. I'm older, cleverer, and will always be more useful and successful than you. I could pull you out of UA in a minute. What do you have to effing show for yourself? Being an ungrateful, selfish effing waste of space. Katsuki swallowed thickly and kept quiet. As I effing thought. When you find out when you're coming back, you're going to effing tell me straight away, got it? So that I can warn everyone who'll have to deal with your fuckery and I can prepare to deal with your shit. You're such a villain, Bakugou. How do you even live with yourself? Have you ever even stopped to think about how it feels for others to have to deal with you? God. I feel sorry for your parents. A bully like you, it's hard to know if you even care about the efforts we're putting into dealing with you. You're just throwing it away like it's nothing, like we have to just deal with it all anyway. Being around you is just tiring at this point. A lump formed in Katsuki's throat. He muttered. Whatever. Speak up, you piece of shit. Mitsuki taunted. I didn't raise a quiet little beach, did I? Yes, Katsuki snapped, forcing away the crack in his voice. Effing fine, I get it. Good. She hung up. No goodbyes or anything even remotely similar, like a do well in your studies or don't disappoint me. Even so, the only thing different to normal was the lack of a farewell insult. But then, Katsuki had a pretty good feeling that Mitsuki had just forgotten. She was probably scowling over the missed opportunity to make him feel even more like shit right then. Part of him wanted to feel smug about it. The rest was too tired. He sighed, taking his phone away from his ear again to stare blankly at the screen. One new message from Mitsuki, now. And don't be a effing beach about it, you little shit. You know it won't get you any effing attention. You don't deserve attention anyway. Ah. So it seemed she was determined to get her point across despite it. It was so funny, though, Katsuki thought as he power walked to his dorm, not paying enough attention to care as he shoved and knocked past people on his way. He didn't exactly care when people shot words laced with venom at him on streets or at school. He didn't when the crowd booed him for giving Uraraka an equal fight at the sports festival. Not when the public started to doubt if he really was meant to be a hero when the kidnapping took place. Not at any time did he really take their words to heart or believe them. He just continued to push on towards his dream of becoming a hero. And, sure, they all hurt. To varying degrees. The opinions on his fight with Uraraka probably the least, the blame on him for All Might falling probably the most. But they never made him seriously consider that maybe he was what they said he was. Sure, he would entertain the idea for a few days, but he'd always get back up and just punch harder. That was to be applied for strangers, though. People whose opinion he couldn't really care less about, because they didn't know him, so how could they judge properly? Yet with his friends and family, it was a completely different story. For some reason, he always looked up to his mother with an inkling of hope that she'd finally congratulate him. On being top of the class, for example. Or maybe on acing that one test, like he usually did. Perhaps for working so hard, for perfecting that move he'd been working on for months, for getting that email sent home from Aizawa telling them all about his achievements, for being strong enough to intern with Endeavor of all heroes, the #1 hero. Just anything. Could be as simple as cooking for them to as complicated as coming out of a villain fight alive. Not that he was even sure they wanted that. He wasn't sure if he wanted that himself, either. Obviously he never got that. And he shouldn't really expect much else, that's just how parents are, right? But it hurt more than usual when Mitsuki would insult him. More than those people on those news websites he regrets clicking on, more than those people on the street, more than those people in the sports festival stands. Because, despite it all, she was his mother. The one who had been stuck with him since the beginning. The one who made a small, childish part of him want to run up to her and squeal, "Look, look, look what I've done. Look at my achievements. I've worked super hard, aren't you proud?" Similarly, if not more so, insults from his friends were like a gunshot to a wound. These were people who he'd become too comfortable with. Katsuki had trusted them too easily, that had been the problem. All because they never made him feel bad on purpose, never beat him down, never hurt him outside of training or him asking for it purposely. He had grown soft and weak for them. So, when they finally had turned on him, he shouldn't have been surprised or hurt. And yet, just like with his mother, a small part of him was. Every time. And it was pathetic, useless, weak of him, but he just couldn't seem to distinguish that hope that maybe someone would see past this mirage of a monster. He shut himself in his room and lay down on his bed when he finally reached his dorm. With a sigh, he reminded himself that he'd have to ask Aizawa about the next break the next day. Then text the hag about it. All while ignoring glares and insults from the people he used to trust. And, not to forget, he had art history tomorrow, which meant Midnight was teaching them. And she didn't really like him, so there's that. What a wonderful day awaited him. He still wasn't sure if he should trust Kirishima. It was just a childish hope, clouding his vision. Must be, right? Soon enough Kirishima would laugh in his face, because that's just what will happen. Hope, disappointment, shame. That's how it went. Story of my effing life, Katsuki thought, almost snorting to himself. Either way, though, he'd entertained the idea of it until then. He'd let Kirishima do whatever the F he wanted to convince him of the thought that he wanted to actually be friends again. He might even pretend it was real himself. And then, before he could spit in his face and laugh at him and say it was all fake, Katsuki would beat him to it. Avoid the shame and the disappointment. Focus only on the hope and, hopefully, feel good enough by will to drown out the disappointment. That might actually work. He had to live up to his name, right? A villain does not trust nor is trusted. He may as well be called the villain of Class 1A. It hurt to think about. But maybe that voice inside his head was right. The beast villain of Class 1A, here. Times. What's wrong? You've been asking, but I don't have an answer. How come? I'm still thinking let's pretend to fall asleep now. When we get old, will we regret this? Too young to think about all that shit. And stalling only goes so far when you've got a head start. Are you bored yet? By Wallows. Times. Many people in Class 1A had unlikely friend groups and partners. You'd see people like Kuda and Asui who look like they'd never really be friends, one too bold and upfront, the other too shy and innocent. Both too quiet and awkward to hold a conversation. They're actually pretty close since they bond well over their love for frogs and animals others either get scared of or find disgusting. It's actually quite a sweet sight to behold. Fumikage and Todoroki could be another example of this unlikely type of friendship. One seems innocent and calm, pretty much emotionless to anyone who didn't know him well, and the other dark and brooding, usually the type to make dark as my soul jokes. You shouldn't really be surprised to know they're close, though. I doubt you are. They enjoy the peaceful atmosphere each other brings. In Class 1A, there is rarely a peaceful moment that is not spent running for their lives, fighting for their lives, or debating the unfortunate decisions they made leading to that specific point in their lives. So the breath of fresh, calm air each other brought was welcome, even if it was just sitting in the same space reading books and manga. Also they bonded over musicals like Hamilton, but honestly that didn't look as poetic as just appreciating each other's presence, so there's that. The time they spent together was random, usually. This had been one of those times, yet unlike usual, it wasn't as peaceful or as calm, and wasn't exactly random. Todoroki, Fumikage said, tapping said friend on the shoulder as soon as he got down for breakfast that morning. May I speak with you for a moment? Todoroki woke quite early, and since Fumikage was also an early bird, pun intended, not many people were down yet, meaning they had enough privacy needed. Todoroki gave him an understanding look and excused himself from Uraraka and Ida, who he had been talking to. They walked to a corner and Todoroki was the first to speak. I know what this is about, he said with a small frown, but I really doubt this is as serious as it appears to be. Fumikage frowned. Todoroki, look, I understand that you dislike him. But we really need to think about this maturely and seriously, as future heroes. Todoroki said coolly. And I'm telling you, you're probably just overthinking this. Fumikage sighed. To summarize, they had been walking back to the dorms together the day before. Todoroki had noticed Bakugou getting a phone call and nudged him, getting Fumikage to listen in as well as he. They were barely 5 steps away from the blonde, and yet they could hear every word exchanged. The person on the other side of the line made that pretty easy. And after, when Bakugou increased his speed and left them behind unknowingly, they had exchanged grim looks. Fumikage remembered the way Todoroki's mouth was set into a steely line and how he had stiffly nodded when he offered to rest and talk about it the next day. His chest had seemed to tighten when the now normal absence of Bakugou seemed more prominent than usual at the dinner table. Fumikage knew Todoroki was one of the people to spread the information about Bakugou and Midoriya's pasts, that he, and Uraraka, was the one to know about the bullying first, and that he was definitely one of the people who pretty much hated Bakugou for it too. But he also knew that heroes shouldn't deny help to anyone. Especially not just because of some grudge about something that happened in the past. Fumikage himself didn't exactly like Bakugou either. He didn't tend to forgive bullies easily, and that was his opinion and decision alone, but he never made that anyone's problem, including Bakugou's. Yet blatantly ignoring it when Bakugou might need serious help was too far. Sure, he'd be hesitant to lend a hand to his own past bullies, but, as a hero, if they were in serious danger he'd prioritize their life over the past. Enough time for you to effing pick up, you useless brat. You ungrateful piece of shit. I could pull you out of UA in a minute, what do you have to effing show for yourself? No one deserved to be told that by, who he presumed was, their mother. Angry exterior or not, that wasn't right. Anyone would break eventually under the weight of those words. Alright, I understand, Fumikage. Sighed. Todoroki nodded and turned, but Fumikage shook his head. No, wait. HM? Todoroki turned to face him again. I meant. Look. I know you may not want to help, but I do, and whether or not you will help me do that is up to you, as a friend and future hero, Fumikage said, but please. Don't just decide on anger. Actually think about this. Anger is never a good emotion to make decisions on. Especially if it is over something in the past. The other regarded him for a minute quietly, before sighing. Fine. I'll help you. But we need to get our facts right first. I am not the kind of person to needlessly help my friend's bully. Past bully, Fumikage corrected, but yes. Of course. He took a deep breath. Alright, well. From what we've experienced so far, Bakugou's mother, at least, they were female, and I don't think Bakugou has a sister or something like that. She was, well, that was verbal abuse, right? Todoroki seemed hesitant, but caved in quickly at the look Fumikage gave him. I've seen physical abuse, though I'm not very familiar with verbal abuse. But, yes, yeah, I think that could be right. Again, though, with the way Bakugou was talking back, maybe she had a right to be angry. Todoroki. He looked away with a small frown. They both knew it was unlikely. Fumikage sighed. Well, so we know for sure that his mother is verbally abusing him to some degree, at the least. Though from that one short phone call we can't tell to what extent. You think that there could be more? Todoroki asked lowly, slowly getting more serious and concerned as the conversation went on. He gave the other a wary look. Right now, I don't know what to think, but it may be best to assume the worst to be prepared for it. Todoroki pursed his lips and Fumikage continued. We don't know much else, do we, then? Even before all this, Bakugou rarely spoke about his parents, and if he did it was never in very good light. We brushed over it because we thought it was just his personality, but, Todoroki sighed. Alright, so that's what we know. What should we be asking, then? Do you think is safe currently? From both verbal and maybe even physical abuse? I'm not sure, Fumikage admitted. Because of the dorms, it may have lifted the weight a little, but phone calls can still happen and the breaks and holidays from school are still very real. He frowned. What I don't understand is, well, why didn't he come to any of us? Before this whole mess about the bullying, I could tell he was extremely close with people like Kirishima, Ashido, Kaminari, Zero, etc. Why not tell someone? He was surrounded by heroes, he could have gotten help. Todoroki sighed and he stared at the floor. When I was younger, I was abused by my father. Fumikage tried not to let too much of a large reaction loose. Even though it felt a little out of the blue, he still didn't want Todoroki to feel uncomfortable. Even so, he couldn't help but let his eyes widen. I'm all right now, Todoroki said to the relief of Fumikage, but it was bad. Endeavor is changing to be a better person. Yet before he used to physically abuse me under the guise of training to get the perfect air to surpass all might. I wasn't really verbally abused, though, it was more I know you can do it or you have to become stronger, Shoto. Never really anything that made me feel, yeah. I'm sorry. You didn't deserve that. Don't be, Todoroki said with a small smile. It's not your fault he was an a-hole. Anyway, I have a plan for it all with Midoriya. But that's not the point. He took a deep breath. When I was younger, I didn't realize that abuse was not normal until around the age of 9 or 10, when a quick, rare interaction with my siblings took place and they spoke to me about it. The lateness was mostly due to the isolation from other children my father was insistent on, but I think it also could have been the fact that no one really told me what abuse was, even with professional meetings or in hero galas. Thank you for sharing that with me, Todoroki. It must have been hard, though I trust you have something sorted, hopefully? Todoroki nodded, and Fumikage sighed in relief, before frowning. But, wait. So you think that the reason he didn't tell anyone was because he doesn't know that he is being abused? Not exactly, Todoroki said. I think that he wouldn't have known when he was younger, up until around possibly 6 or 7. But in a normal school, I think, I've heard that there are occasional lessons that bring awareness to it. Fumikage nodded, remembering his own lessons on it when he had been younger. Right. So he must have realized at some point during those lessons. Fumikage frowned, tilting his head to the side. I don't understand. So he knows he's being abused. Still, why wouldn't he tell anyone? Todoroki looked hesitant and he looked away. Remember when you first brought up the idea of verbal abuse, and I was quite unconvinced. Yes? Well, if you look at Bakugou, Todoroki said, and all you see is a strong quirk, a clever, logical mind, and an attitude which practically yells that he wouldn't let anyone do shit to him over his dead body, someone that looks untouchable with a terrible attitude. Well, you see him, and he comes up to you and says he's being abused. Todoroki sighed and shook his head. Nearly any adult these days would laugh in his face and say that he either deserved it or he's exaggerating. Fumikage felt like he'd been punched. He swallowed thickly. It sounded about right. He'd met his own fair share of unbothered adults. Once a kid in his school was being bullied. A friend of Fumikage, and so for support he'd gone with him as he went to finally tell a trusted teacher. After all, that was what it had said in the presentation in that lesson about bullying, right? Tell a trusted adult. He'd been there when the teacher had laughed at his friend. Had laughed and said, "What? You must be exaggerating, come on. With a strong quirk like yours, no one would try to bully you. Come on now, you shouldn't be trying to get these role model students in trouble." So, yes, he could picture that happening to Bakugou. And he felt sick. So you mean, he forced out, he might have gone to someone and had been told it was really nothing? How dark does one have to be to dismiss something like this? Todoroki shrugged with a tight face. It's pretty hard to believe Bakugou of all people being, well, abused. Especially when he snaps at people if they so much look at him wrong. Fumikage frowned. I'm not letting this go on any longer. I'd love to agree, but, Todoroki grimaced, I know firsthand how hard it is to stop that. And I'm pretty sure the Bakugous are a big name in the fashion industry. Endeavor bought from them once and had them make outfits inspired by him as merch to surpass all might in the popularity polls. It didn't work, obviously, but I still remember him ranting about them. Accusing them won't be easy. Then we'll need a whole lot of evidence and people on our side, Fumikage said, determined. Probably money, too. Todoroki frowned, and Fumikage knew what his doubts were. The public were already weary of Bakugou, thanks to the many problems others had caused him. The sports festival, the kidnapping, the fall of All Might. Who knew how many people would help them if the need arose? They might just call bull before they even know the proper details. That, and the fact that they'd still need Bakugou's permission to do anything weighed heavy on their shoulders as they separated to get ready for school. Bakugou might not see their help as something good. Halfway through homeroom, Fumikage realized that school break must be coming soon. He should ask Aizawa. The boy was about to raise his hand when Bakugou got up instead. He exchanged an uneasy glance with Todoroki before focusing solely on Bakugou and Aizawa, listening intently. He'd tell Aizawa about this situation later. He hoped he was not like other adults and would not brush this off lightly, but right then, he had to listen. Fumikage was determined to help his classmate. The darkness of his past be DM'd. Plus, Shouter sighed. It was 8:31 a.m. He was stuck in homeroom with these problematic brats, his kids, for 4 more minutes before he'd be allowed to sleep, or he'd have to teach another lesson. He hadn't bothered to look at his router. Sue him for prioritizing sleep. Having gone over any and all notices, he was trying to get some sleep in now. Who knew, maybe Shouter could cram 3 hours worth into 4 minutes. No, that's not how time works, but hey, he'd dim well try. Oi, Aizawa. The nosy class quietened significantly, showing they were listening, but it was as if they were trying not to be caught. He should really teach those kids some form of stealth. Shouter slowly opened one eye to see Bakugou standing by his desk. He sighed again, before unzipping his sleeping bag and getting up. Bakugou, do you need anything? He asked. If he just got out of that warm cocoon for nothing, he was gonna throw hands. Obviously not literally, but he definitely felt like it. Bakugou faltered in his gaze, looking away with a scowl. Effing obviously. When do we break off school? As in a break. Shouter raised an eyebrow. Do you want a break? I never took you for the type. Their eyes met fiercely. No, of course effing not. I'd rather further improve my effing skills here than effing go back. The hag's asking. Bakugou looked away again. Any other student would jump in joy at the prospect of a break. Why are you so hesitant? Shouter sighed and thought to himself, trying to remember the dates. It's next week. Starting this Friday, students are allowed to go home. If they want to stay in the dorms during the weekends, that's alright too, but they can't stay on campus for the whole break starting on Sunday, which will last a week, by the way, because of the lack of staff there to supervise. Is that alright? Shouter pretended not to notice when Bakugou's fists got so tight they went white, and his gaze was slightly unfocused on the floor somewhere behind him. When he remembered he was being watched, yes, by Shouter, but the other problem children weren't doing an all that great job at hiding their blatant stares, he immediately straightened, fists forcefully relaxing, although shaking, and he met Shouter's gaze fiercely. Yeah. It's effing whatever, he said, turning away and walking back to his seat. Shouter frowned and he called after him, actually, could you come back here for a minute? The blonde froze for a second, before huffing and stomping back. What? Shouter said carefully, is there anything going on? Anything wrong? Bakugou let his eyes flicker for a millisecond towards his classmates, so quickly Shouter wasn't sure he'd seen it. What gives you that effing idea? He frowned. You're quieter than usual. Less, yourself. If anything is going on that I can help you with? Nothing's effing happening, so you can PSS off, Bakugou snapped. I don't need your effing help. Shouter waited a second to continue. No. I agree, you may not need it, but grappling problems on your own isn't great, I should know, kid. I just want you to know I'm always an option here. A beat passed. Nothing's happening. Shouter nodded with a quiet sigh. Okay then. Keep in mind what I've told you, though. If you ever need anything. I won't, he replied quickly, like it was a reflex. Sure. There was definitely something going on. Bakugou wasn't fooling him. But whether or not he would ever find out was dependent on the series of events that would follow. If Bakugou does reach out to him about whatever it is, he might know how to help. If he doesn't, he won't know what to help with in the first place. But if it was so bad as to make the loudest kid, perhaps except for Kaminari or Ashido, in class so quiet, he was determined to find a way to help. Shouta may have been cessed about his past with Midoriya, but Bakugou was still a kid. He was still Shouta's kid, and he wasn't about to ignore any problems his kids may be having. Especially if they're serious. "Oi, Aizawa," Bakugou said. Shouta blinked and looked back at him, having thought their conversation was over. I'm gonna stay in the dorms for the weekends. That effing allowed or what?" Shouta nodded. "I'm sure it can be arranged." "Why? Why do you seem so reluctant to go home?" Maybe he was just being pessimistic, but he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Bakugou nodded once, and walked back to his seat. Shouta frowned when Hagekyu seemed to try and trip him up. Maybe she did it by accident or something? What looked worse was that Bakugou didn't even do anything. Just scowled at her and continued. Where was the yelling, the cursing? Shouta's eyes narrowed as he settled back into his chair. He'd keep an eye on him. He had a bad feeling about the blonde. About all of this. Times. I'm sure there won't always be sunshine. But there's this momentary beam of light. You don't have to wait those salty decades. To get through the gate, it's all in front of your face. Notion, by the rare occasions. Times. Lunchtime found Katsuki, Kirishima, and Monoma sitting on the same table again. As much as he hated to admit, he found relief in the similar banter and chatting that used to surround the table before this all started. Sure, it wasn't the same as having the whole Baku squad again, but the similar normalcy got his shoulders to relax the slightest bit. I'm telling you dude, Kirishima said, shaking his head as he set down his tray. If Vlad King gives me one more look in the corridor, I'm going to actually die. Monoma, who had already been seated, scoffed. What, because you can't handle how much of a better teacher he is to the hobo caterpillar you call a mentor? Kirishima snorted. Dude. Never say that to Aizawa's face. But no, bro. 'Cause it's so awkward. He just stares at me until he's out of sight. The eye contact is real, dude. Katsuki rolled his eyes. Honestly, he could picture that happening, but if he were in Kirishima's shoes he'd just glare right the F back until the other gets uncomfortable. Works every effing time. His eyes caught on a pair of purple ones in the lunch queue. Talk about awkward eye contact. Shinso raised an eyebrow at him and pointedly looked at the other two on his table. What are they doing there with you? Katsuki shrugged and glared. F if I know. Shinso raised both eyebrows slightly, unimpressed. Should I come over there? Katsuki narrowed his eyes and scrunched his nose, like he'd asked a stupid question, because he had. Do I look like I care? Do effing whatever. Shinso snorted and turned back to the queue when his turn to order came, satisfied with their eye-to-eye conversation. Katsuki turned to find Monoma and Kirishima looking at him weird. What the F are you idiots looking at? Kirishima pursed his lips and looked back down at his food, hiding a snort. He wisely decided not to say anything. Monoma, however, didn't seem so bright. He said dryly, you can't seriously have just held an eye conversation. The Bakugou Katsuki, talking without so much as a yell? This is just... Oh, effing piss us off, copycat. Katsuki yelled, you don't even effing know. Mind if I sit here? Shinso asked out of nowhere. Shut up. He did not scare the shit out of Katsuki, thank you very much. He didn't wait for an answer and slammed his plate next to Katsuki's, sitting down calmly. The insomniac-eyed Kirishima, who was sitting opposite, like he was a criminal under trial, while somehow looking as tired and innocent as ever from an outside perspective. Kirishima said awkwardly. Sure? Shinso continued to eye him up and down coldly. Katsuki decided to ignore whatever the F was going on between them. Monoma continued eating, watching them both with an amused glint in his eye. And meanwhile Kirishima looked so uncomfortable that he seemed willing to sink into the earth right then and there. Said boy gulped and grinned awkwardly under Shinso's stare. You're that Shinso dude from Gen Ed, right? The one who, fought Midoriya, in the sports festival, right? Yep, Shinso said simply, not saying anything else as he picked up some food with his chopstick slowly, still maintaining eye contact. He trained with Aizawa personally, though. He knew how to do a death stare. Kirishima squirmed under his scrutinizing gaze and glanced at Monoma and Katsuki as a silent plea to help. After a few seconds, he let loose a whimper. Dude, what's your problem? Oh, I don't know, Shinso said coolly, eyes narrowing. What's yours? Kirishima squeaked. Katsuki fought the urge to snort and decided, as the generous, kind person as he was, to help slightly. Oi, I don't know what the F is going on here, but are you both finished being effing weird yet? I don't care, honestly, but it's effing annoying, so. I don't even know what you're talking about, Shinso said innocently, finally looking at Katsuki out of the corner of his eye. Katsuki deadpanned before rolling his eyes. Effing whatever. You don't have homemade lunch suddenly? The F happened to that? Shinso shrugged. Wanted to try lunch rushs. It's actually not too bad. Not as good as mine, though, Katsuki growled. Shinso just smirked, which only sessed him off further. Fuck us. Ooh, that's a new one, Shinso mused, taking a bite out of his food. Oh, piss us off, Katsuki barked in annoyance. Shinso snorted and shook his head. Monoma hummed from his seat. Oi, Shinso, how come you know Bakugou? I wouldn't have thought you'd be acquainted with a member of the scum class. 1A. I could ask you the same, Shinso frowned in confusion. I thought you hated this guy. Monoma clicked his tongue. Yes, well, it's not like I have much of a choice. It was either that grapist thing and the rest of Class A on my table, or this explosive a-hole. So I took my chances with him. He's not bad once you get to know him, I'll give you that, Shinso shrugged. He's right effing here, you dickheads. Katsuki snapped, ears turning a little red at the somewhat compliment. But yeah, I don't even know how we started hanging out either, Shinso said with a teasing smile, completely ignoring Katsuki as he leant slightly towards Monoma. It was a gradual thing. But, like, we're the bestest of friends now. It's chill. What the F are you telling them, effing eye bags? One might even say BFFs. We are not. I effing hate you so much. He loves me. I'll kill you. See? Shinso continued, loves me more than he loves his All Might limited edition merch. Katsuki just pinched the bridge of his nose and groaned, giving up on insisting otherwise. Kirishima snorted and he shifted his glare towards him too as Monoma started encouraging Shinso with quips of, ah yes, you're both so perfect, eh? Or, yet, don't worry my dear Shinso, I see it. He refrained from slamming his head on the table. Plus, Shouter sighed in his sleeping bag as teachers shifted around him. He was so tired of this sheet. When he had applied to be a teacher, it had been all, you'd be great with kids, Shouter. Or, it'll be a fun and useful experience. He should have been effing notified that he'd be dealing with traumatized, problem children beforehand. Not that it would have changed his mind. DMN. He was getting soft. He sighed again. Those kids are gonna be the death of me. Probably literally at some point. That's an awful lot of sighing, Sho, Hisashi teased from where he was marking papers at his desk. You alright? Shouter groaned. Other than having to worry about a stupid problem child 24/7? Peachy. Midnight snorted. Which one is it this time? No wait, Hisashi grinned, let me guess. Is it Midoriya? Surprisingly not, this time, Shouter admitted, at least, I think so. Wait, really? Midnight said, confused. Well then. Todoroki? Nope. Hisashi frowned. Oh. Shinso. Technically he's not in Class 1A, but I'm pretty sure he's your favorite, right? Shouter opened his eyes to glare at him. I don't pick favorites. Midnight snorted, that's a gay out lie. Can't fool your bestest ever friends, Shouter, you know. You aren't my bestest, you aren't my best friends, Shouter scowled. Don't worry, you don't gotta say it, Midnight cooed. But we know. Wait. I think I got it. Hisashi exclaimed. Shouter lifted an eyebrow. You're still thinking about that? Is it Kaminari? No, Shouter sighed. He may be your favorite. Not my fault he's the best in English and funny. But he's not who I'm worried about, Shouter pursed his lips. It's Bakugou. 3, 2, 1. What Bakugou? Midnight exclaimed loudly, drawing in the attention of the other teachers in the room, namely Snipe, Cementos, All Might, Ectoplasm and 13. Shout louder, I don't think Brazil heard you, Shouter muttered. What's this about Bakugou? 13 asked curiously, walking by with a stack of papers in hand as they beelined for their desk. Come to think about it, he and his class have been acting quite strange. Is it something to do with that? In what sense? Snipe said from where he was writing on his desk. I don't teach Class 1A often, so I haven't had the chance to see them in a while now. Well, Midnight said, frowning. Yeah, I kinda see it now that you say so. I'm not sure when it started, but the class has been acting. Well, I'm not sure. They don't seem to like Bakugou much now. Shouter, do you know what he did to them? Shouter hesitated, before sighing. I'm only telling you this because I feel you should know as his teachers and protectors. Otherwise I wouldn't. Bakugou used to bully Midoriya in middle school. And, according to what Midoriya's friends have told me, Bakugou suicide baited Midoriya once. Hisashi swallowed thickly, frowning. That's horrible. Is he getting punished for this or what? I've already discussed this with Nedzu, yet he said Bakugou shouldn't be expelled just yet, Shouter explained. Since it happened in a different school, we shouldn't be punishing him, and he is basically one of the most promising kids in my class. We haven't called his parents yet, but I don't think it's needed anyway. That's bullshit. Midnight gasped. He shouldn't be let off so easily. God, I knew Bakugou had the personality of a villain, but I never thought he'd go so far. Oh, poor Midoriya. Shouter glared. Nemurai, please refrain from saying my student, a child, has a personality of a villain. It's wrong and we both know it. So is suicide baiting an innocent boy? Midnight snapped. I'm not sorry. I knew from the beginning he was more suited for villainy, but this. Nemurai. In a second, Shouter was standing, sleeping bag off to the side. I don't care what you think of him, but I will not stand by while you talk badly about my student. Do I make myself clear? Midnight stood up too, walking over so that they were eye to eye. You've grown too soft, Shouter. Sooner or later you'll have to recognize the wrongdoings of your students whether you like it or not, you know. As will you with your own actions, Shouter said calmly. The only difference is that I am actually being logical about the information given to me. Midnight's nostrils flared and her fists clenched. Why, you? Okay. Let's calm down, guys. We're all friends here. Hisashi attempted, walking in between them. Nem, go back to your desk or just please calm down. Sho, I just don't understand why you're taking Bakugou's side here, not gonna lie. Shouter ripped his glare from Midnight's eyes. Actually think about it. Bakugou has changed. You've all seen how much has changed since the start of the year. He cares about his friends and he wants to help people. Hell, his dream is to be the #1 hero. Have you seen how hard he works for it? For fame and money, that is, Midnight muttered. Shouter scoffed, yeah, like you can talk. Shouter, I want to help people. How could you say otherwise? Midnight snapped. You're the one who's only a teacher, not because you actually want to help the children, but because you want to live out what Oboro suggested before he died. You're so selfish you can't even help children who are just trying to survive for the sake of helping them. Just because you want to lessen the guilt of Oboro's death for yourself doesn't mean. She faltered at Shouter's shocked and pained expression. It was so silent you could hear a pin drop, even on the carpeted floor. Hisashi's voice was quiet and tired as he put a hand on Shouter's shoulder gently. Look, I think we're all saying things we don't mean right now. Let's just stop talking about this all. Nothing good will come of it, so let's just get back to work. Midnight's expression crumpled. Zeshi, show, please. I didn't mean to say. Nemire, just, Hisashi said, looking at her with pricks of tears in his eyes. Just don't. It was known that between the four of them, Shouter had been closest to Oboro before he passed. Then it had been Hisashi. Midnight hadn't been as close, since she'd only really become a part of their group somewhere in their second year, but she'd been close enough to know how much his death had impacted them both. Shouter shrugged off Hisashi's hand and turned his back. Fine, all right. Think what you want. But keep in mind I will never agree with any wrongs you think about him. With that, he picked up his sleeping bag and left, ignoring the other confused and shocked teachers in the room. Toshinori inched towards Midnight as she sat down at her desk and stared at her papers. Are you all right, Midnight? He asked somewhat awkwardly. I don't know, what do you think, All Might? Midnight said softly, gazing at where Hisashi had his head in his hand at his desk. I made two of my closest friends upset, did the one thing I never should have done. I'm a sheet friend. Ah. Now, I'm sure it can perhaps be fixed. Toshinori said. Maybe if you make it up to him somehow, he may give you a chance to apologize, at the least. Midnight frowned. Maybe. Toshinori eventually left, leaving her to her thoughts. And as she thought, she wondered how she had lost her temper so easily. Why had this all happened in under 10 minutes? The answer, she had concluded, was Bakugou. She lifted her head in determination, a fire in her eye. She was going to help Shouter see what Bakugou really was. Then maybe he'd be able to get rid of Bakugou without guilt and be less stressed out. Hopefully in the end giving Midnight a chance to apologize. The chance to apologize was just a bonus, though, considering getting rid of Bakugou might really help Shouter's, and maybe everyone's, mental health. It fleeted everyone's mind on the reason why Shouter had been worrying about Bakugou in the first place. They would soon regret it. Times. But I'm a creep. I'm a weirdo. What the hell am I doing here? I don't belong here. I don't belong here. Creep, by Radiohead. Times. Katsuki woke up in a cold sweat. He sighed, trying to slow his breathing, and sat up with a groan. His room was still dark, alarm clock on the side being his only source of light. It bathed everything in a dim pearly glow. He rubbed his eyes with a grimace as parts of his nightmare flashed before his eyes. Hands made of sludge gripping his neck so hard he could barely breathe. Red glaring at him, followed by golden, black, and pink. Midoriya smiling as he extended a hand, only to take it back when Katsuki reached out, with a cruel laugh. His mother raising a hand, ready to strike. Katsuki took a shaky breath, forcing open crimson eyes to get rid of the images. He ran a trembling hand through his hair. F-it. He glanced at his alarm clock tiredly. 6:34 a.m., Friday. He sighed. He should probably get up anyway. It was only half an hour lost. Katsuki swung his legs out of bed, quickly getting dressed, and dragged himself to his door. Hopefully, with how early it was, no one would be in the kitchen. He slipped his phone out as he walked. The blonde had Shinso's contacts in his phone. They said it was just for emergency purposes when they had exchanged numbers. Which, technically was also true, considering the amount of times they requested a spar with each other before either one of them punched something else, but if you counted sending a "Hey dickhead," replied to by a "WTF do you want you mind bitch" to be then replied to by a "stupid, wanted to annoy you," by smiley face as an emergency. Well, you should probably check up on your understanding of an emergency. But the point was, they rarely used it as an emergency. They being Shinso, the annoying fucker. Well, it was 6 in the morning, and he'd probably be the only other person awake right now. He opened his contacts, only to see messages that had been sent at 11:57 p.m. the day before from Shinso. Yesterday, at 11:57 p.m. Mindfuck. Oi blasty. You gotta tell me honestly here. WTF was Sharky doing on that table? Also, do I need to make someone punch themselves? BC I am very willing to do that RN. Today. Lord Explodo. Is this about yesterday? Effing WTH. As expected, Shinso replied quickly, because of course the insomniac fucker was awake even after staying up until goddamn midnight. Mindfuck. OBV. So your answer? Lord Explodo. It's effing fine. He apologized like a few effing days ago. Mindfuck. And you forgive him? Lord Explodo. Not effing yet obviously. But in giving him a stupid chance for now. Nowhere near respect or trust though, so he can PSS of W that sheet. Shinso didn't reply for a minute. Mindfuck. You realize he didn't give you a chance, right? I don't mean to be angsty here, but I DK about this. Lord Explodo. I know. But now he is. So I'm not gonna drop to their effing level and hold a stupid grudge for all of eternity. Doubt he'll ever ACC trust him again though. Mindfuck. HM. You think VRY differently to how I think. But okay, sounds legit. I approve then. Still not ACC happy W it though. Lord Explodo. Piss off, I don't need your approval, you're not my effing dad. Mindfuck. Sigh. One day son you'll understand how I feel. Lord Explodo. Effing you WTF. Mindfuck. Yeah, no, I'm never saying that again. Oh. Katsuki snorted and opened the kitchen door. He muttered, stupid fucker. Mindfuck. Wait, so does this mean I can't make him punch himself? Lord Explodo. No. Mindfuck. Just a little bit. Lord Explodo. Effing no. Mindfuck. Fine. I gotta go anyway though. Bye Blasty. Lord Explodo. Don't die dickhead. Mindfuck. Right back at ya asswipe. Katsuki smiled ever so slightly and swiped out of Shinso's contact. Now, for something he really didn't want to do. But he'd put it off yesterday and any later would be too late. His mother was probably at work right then anyway. If she didn't pick up, that would be fine, and he could blame not calling her on that. His heart sank when the call was answered on the fourth ring. Brat, Mitsuki spat, took you effing long enough to call back. Yeah, effing whatever, Katsuki sighed as he opened a cupboard. From the conversation he'd just had with Shinso, he felt a little confident. Which would be dangerous with his mother. But he couldn't find it in himself to care as he stood in the dorm kitchen, alone at 6:45 a.m. on a Friday, with her technically nowhere in sight. Oh, ho, how dare you! You will not talk to your mother like that, Katsuki. Just wait until you get back here. Mitsuki shouted, and against his will he flinched a little. You! He clicked his tongue, eager to skip the whole degrading speech she was bound to spew. I get it, I effing get it. Useless, bratty, villainous. Gone over that 1,000 effing times. Anyway, I spoke with my effing teacher. What did he say, then? Mitsuki demanded sharply. And don't you even think about lying to me, Katsuki. You know how well that went for you last time. He did. On the summer break a few months ago, he told his mother he'd be back a week after he was supposed to be, and had camped outdoors in that time. It was the first and last time he had lied about his school breaks. She'd been furious when she'd found out by talking to Midoriya's mother about it, and he'd gotten one hell of a beating. Katsuki swallowed thickly at the memory. Yeah, he said. Aizawa Thui. He said. Spit it out, brat, I don't have all effing day. He said we can go by Friday, today, but we have to effing go by Sunday, Katsuki blurted. Aizawa. Allowed me to stay until Sunday, though, so. Mitsuki scoffed. F that. You're coming today, right after school ends. What? Katsuki's eyes widened. He swallowed the small lump in his throat as his blood turned to ice. But I can't do that. First, I'd need a effing permission slip from Aizawa. Then I'd need to effing pack my sheet. I can't do that by today, hag. In his defense, he was only semi-lying. The packing he could do quickly, there was barely anything to pack other than one lonely suitcase. On the other hand though, there could always be some kind of hold-up that could prevent him from doing it fast enough, right? And the permission slip, sure, he could get it quickly if he asked first thing in the morning, would only take a few hours to get it through to Nedzu and then the system. But, well, why should he be interrupting his dear teacher's lunch break for a mere permission slip that could wait until at least the next day? But white lie or not, he was scrambling for anything that could delay him going home by even a few minutes. God. He had no idea how other kids did it. Wanting to go home was just stupid in his eyes. Guess he was just so weak he couldn't even go through a normal thing properly. Katsuki felt like he could physically see his mother's snarl when she spat. Fine, you problematic brat. You just have to make everything hard for me, don't you? Might as well walk into oncoming effing traffic, you'd be less of a effing bother. I'm giving you until tomorrow to sort your sheet out, otherwise I'm coming over there myself. Got it? Or do I need to beat it into your thick skull? He ignored the sting in his eyes. Fucking got it, Katsuki muttered. He was too relieved to have at least one more day away from her to bother adding in a sharp tone. TCH. Oh, and one more thing, Katsuki, Mitsuki said, as if speaking to him was a chore in itself. Your behavior at school should be effing perfect. If I hear a single thing from your teachers or peers, I will make you regret it so hard you'll wish you had a time-traveling quirk instead of your stupid effing villainous one. I am not going to be embarrassed by you again, not if I can help it. Do I make myself clear? And there goes his heart through his butt again. Yeah, I effing understand. I'm not two anymore, hag, Katsuki snapped. Mitsuki clicked her tongue. Could fool me half the effing time. Right, well, I have better things to get to, now. Don't get me and your father into shit again, Katsuki. Better things to get to, better things than talking to her son, to Katsuki. But that didn't matter. Since when did he care what she thought? Literally, who are you trying to effing kid? Since effing always, you sappy a-hole. No wonder she doesn't want you. You know I effing. He didn't manage to finish his sentence before he was hung up on. You know, one of these days, he'd be the one to hang up on her. Ha! The face she'd make. Katsuki sighed, realizing he'd completely forgotten about his breakfast and the open cupboard door in front of him. Knowing he had about half an hour for a jog and another hour to get himself properly ready for school, he considered making himself a full breakfast meal, which actually wasn't much, just a bowl of cereal. He had the time, after all. But then, a padding of feet on the stairs coming closer made him change his mind quickly and snatch a breakfast bar, leaving the kitchen hastily. He wasn't very hungry anyway. As he opened the front door, his crimson eyes accidentally scanned the room, catching Kaminari's amber ones. They widened when they saw him and Kaminari nearly tripped over the sofa when he tried to rush over to Katsuki. What the hell was the idiot doing this early in the morning? Wait. Katsuki didn't let him finish before slamming the door and power walking away, quickly pacing into a jog. He heard the door reopen behind him when he was a good few meters away, but he didn't look back. Kaminari was no doubt frowning, though, when he muttered, Bakugou. It took a good bit of willpower not to turn and see what he wanted. Even more to not launch into a sprint. Katsuki continued his run and tried his best to ignore his thoughts in favor of the birdsong around him. What a promising start to the day, right? Plus, it was the lesson after homeroom that Katsuki realized that no, karma definitely hadn't finished with him just yet, no matter how his new friends, could he say that? If he did, it would mean it's real, it's something he could lose. And anyway, it wasn't like they made it known that they actually wanted to hang out with him, made it feel like everything was getting better. Because he was so very lucky, it was modern art history. Which was taught by midnight. Now, don't get him wrong, he wasn't scared of her. He didn't think that she wasn't a worthy hero either, because he knew she'd put her life on the line for others many times, and that had to count for something, right? Furthermore, he was used to the way she seemed wary around him, like he would explode abruptly in the middle of lesson. Used to the way she seemed to favor everyone else, the way she'd criticize him for the littlest thing, the way she said, "You need to fix that attitude, Bakugou. It's too unbecoming of a hero." He was used to all this, and everything was at a mild level anyway, so he didn't really care to do something about it. He could deal with it alone, it wasn't like she was assaulting him or anything. That might have been why, when she opened the door with a smile which dropped as soon as she saw Katsuki, a shiver ran down his spine. Something was different. And different, next to always, meant bad. "Good morning, She beamed again, as if nothing was wrong. All right, everyone take your books out, and the homework I set you last week. It may be the last day before break, but no one's getting off easy, now. Okay, that was okay. Katsuki had done the homework a long time ago, and he found both relatively quickly from his bag. He ignored the stares that followed him as he placed them on his desk. Midnight walked around as she checked everyone's work, saying, "Well done," and, "Good, good," or, "Fix that up a little for me, sweetie, but otherwise great work." Then, she got to him. And the atmosphere did a complete. The air turned colder than when they trained with Todoroki as she picked up his work with a down tilt in her lips. Bakugou. Midnight said his name as if she'd said it 1,000 times and had gotten tired of it by the second. "What have I told you about fixing your handwriting? It's pretty much unreadable." Katsuki was pretty sure the grape's handwriting was even more unreadable, both morally and literally, but if that, he guessed. "Then you're just effing blind. Learn to effing read." It was silent as the class waited for what Midnight was going to say next. Katsuki would never admit that the scowl she then put on reminded him of his mother. The hero placed both hands on his desk and leant down slowly, as if talking to a child. "Look, kid. With a personality like yours, I'm finding it pretty damn hard to believe you can be a hero. Either fix how you talk to people, or I'll be having words with your teacher and the principal about your place in this school. Do I make myself clear? Behave, brat, or I'll pull you out of UA. Do I make myself clear?" Katsuki swallowed back the lump in his throat, forcing the echo of his mother to go away. He glared at Mitsuki Midnight as a response. She waited a second, probably daring him to speak back, before straightening again. "Alright, well. Then the thing he expected the least happened. Hey, actually, I don't think that's very kind, miss," Kirishima said, standing up with a frown. Katsuki couldn't even snap at the boy for standing up for him, he was so surprised. "What?" Midnight frowned and stared at them in surprise and confusion. "Wait, no. He takes back what he said earlier. At least Kirishima had actually told him he wanted to make amends, so that should have been sort of expected. But this? Yeah, Kaminari said, standing up too. What the hell? I mean, telling a student he needs to pretty much change his personality, and then threatening said student with expulsion for it? Not exactly heroic. Katsuki wasn't sure what was happening. Midnight chuckled, "Look, it's sweet you're standing up for your friend, but I don't think that you should be. No, see, I don't think it's right to, well, basically threaten a student, honestly," Zero of all people said, still in his seat, hands casually behind his head and acting like this was a normal thing. "What do you think, Mina?" Ashido looked at Katsuki with a flicker of doubt in her eyes. She looked at Katsuki, whose eyes were wide and conflicted, whose posture was rigid, whose eye bags could counter Aizawa's, and she saw something. Katsuki never knew what. "Absolutely right, my dear Zero," she smiled, soft eyes fixed on Katsuki. "You might not seem to exactly like his personality, Midnight, but that isn't the way to go about it. I know that now." Kirishima and Kaminari were beaming at their friends, while Zero just gave Midnight a so. "What are you gonna do now?" "Look." Midnight looked as stunned as Katsuki felt. She huffed, "All right, fine, you all want to do this? Your problem. Detention for all of you if you don't quiet down and let me continue with my teaching." As usual, an adult pulling rank on them as a defense instead of trying to explain or talk it out. Pathetic, but expected. Kirishima and Kaminari sat down slowly with glares towards Midnight, and Zero leaned forward, no longer with a nonchalant aura around him. Ashido leant back, giving Midnight a look which said, "I'm judging you but you can't call me out on it because I'm not even saying anything," and their teacher was obviously uncomfortable with it. "It's not even teaching, but okay then," Midoriya then muttered behind him. From the mildly scandalized look on Midnight's face, he had probably rolled his eyes too. Since when had Midoriya gotten so sassy? "Midoriya? Could you repeat that?" she said with a fake, sweet smile. "With pleasure," Midoriya said dryly. He articulated his words loudly and clearly so that the whole class could hear when he said, "Threatening a student with expulsion isn't teaching. Criticizing and insulting them for something you definitely should not be criticizing is not teaching. Making a student feel like shit is not teaching. And oh shit, Midoriya just swore. WL. That wasn't threatening, Midoriya. I was just telling him the consequences his actions will have if he doesn't start doing as I say. Right, of course, Midoriya said with a smile in his voice. And so here I am telling you that if you keep teaching like this, I have a feeling Nezu wouldn't appreciate it much, now would he? Midnight frowned. You have no reason to go to Nezu, I haven't done anything wrong. You wouldn't dare. Midoriya shrugged. Don't worry, it's not a threat. Just stating the consequences of your actions, Miss Midnight. The class was silent. Midnight and Midoriya's eye contact never wavered. Kaminari snickered quietly. All right, everyone turn to page 50 in your booklets, their teacher said loudly, turning away with one last look. Chop, chop, people, we've got to get through 6 pages today. Katsuki blinked, and when his eyes burnt a little, that was when he realized he hadn't blinked for a hot minute. What the hell had just happened? He glanced at Kaminari, who was trying to casually lean back and whisper, "Hey, what's the answer to question 3? To Kirishima, but ended up losing control of his chair mid-sentence and toppling off of it with a loud clang and a yelp. Midnight sighed with narrowed eyes. No cheating, Kaminari. Kaminari sighed, lifting his chair back up as he muttered, "It's always, no. Cheating, Kaminari, and not are you okay, Kaminari? Everyone is so cruel to me." Midnight repeated, "Kaminari." Yeah, Kaminari groaned, flopping back into his seat. "And by the way, since you didn't ask, I'm okay." Kirishima snorted behind him. Okay. So the usual behavior between those two. That didn't explain what the hell just happened. He looked towards Ashido and Zero, Ashido, who was doodling in her book then snickering and showing her drawings to Kirishima, and Zero, who was trying to balance 4 glue sticks on his elbow. He squinted his eyes at them, completely and utterly confused. What's more, most of the class seemed less actively sessed at him, though that may have just been because it was so obvious that what Midnight had done was out of line, yet her actions were similar to, if not less cruel than, his classmates. He had to admit, though, maybe Midnight was right in a sense about. Katsuki frowned. There was one more person who could provide an answer, hopefully without him outright asking. He eyed Midnight warily, but she was on her computer and seemed completely focused on that, considering she hadn't seen what Zero was doing. Sheet, the guy had stacked 6 glue sticks now, and people were quietly cheering him on. Katsuki turned slightly, cautious of anyone watching, and whispered, "Oi, nerd." Midoriya perked up in surprise. "HM? K-Kaken? Me?" "Yeah, no effing sheet, you," Katsuki whispered. "Where the hell did all that come from earlier?" I'm not sure what you mean, Kaken," Midoriya whispered with a small smile. The nerd was stuttering again, back to his usual self, but that didn't mean Katsuki had forgotten about what had gone down less than 2 minutes ago. "Are you effing serious right now? You effing know what I mean, you sassy son of a beach," Katsuki hissed. Midoriya blinked. "Sassy? Oh. That. I don't really know, I just got angry, so. It just, kinda, came out." "You get effing sassy when you get sessed," Katsuki said, unbelieving. "I don't think I effing saw you sassing out effing facepalm at the USJ." "Yeah, 'cause that was different." Midoriya smiled sheepishly. Midnight's a hero, and she should know what's wrong and what's right. At least the villains were, well, villains, so I didn't expect much from them. "So you got fucking sassy and sessed 'cause she wasn't acting like a model hero?" Katsuki whispered, eyebrow lifting. I wasn't sassy," Midoriya insisted. "And besides, I mean, this is a hero school, right? You'd expect the heroes here to at least act like it. You can't blame me for being a little annoyed." "Deku," Katsuki said slowly, "you effing swore. You're nerd but never swears. That wasn't a little annoyed. That was a sassy, sessed-off little piece of broccoli sheet, who suddenly pulled more confidence than I've ever collectively seen in your life out of your butt." Midoriya gaped. I I'm not a broccoli. Katsuki raised his eyebrows, pointedly looking from Midoriya's face to his hair and back. Coulda fucking fooled me. He huffed in playful annoyance. Katsuki was about to turn back around when he hesitated and said, "Don't do it again, nerd. I've said it once and I'll say it again. I can deal with sheet myself without your stupid effing help. I can deal with this." Didn't look like you were, Midoriya said quietly. You looked like you were about to roll over and let her say mean stuff to you. That's not the Kaken I know. Not the Kaken I knew before all this stupid stuff. Yeah. Katsuki turned back to his work with a scowl. Well, maybe you don't know me. If you did, you'd stop sticking up for me and you'd see just how shitty I really am. Midoriya snorted behind him, oblivious to his thoughts as he whispered, I'm sorry, no matter how dramatic you try to be with that, it's just a fact that I know you well, Kaken. Can't deny that. Katsuki just sighed and rolled his eyes, giving him the middle finger over his shoulder. Midoriya snickered to himself. Plus, the next lesson with Cementos went as well as you'd expect. Like effing sheet. That's just effing bullshit. Katsuki shouted, waving his pen. I didn't do sheet. You sighed at me when I told you your work and looked at me like I was upsetting you with my mere existence. That deserves a detention, Cementos said with a hard stare. Your actions were rude and uncalled for, and I take offense because I am spending my time trying to teach you. If you... I sighed and looked like that, Katsuki said through gritted teeth, because I'm effing tired, and had a sheet sleep and a sheet morning. I didn't ask how your day had gone, did I, Bakugou? Cementos shot back. Even still, that is no excuse to be so rude. You need to learn to treat people with the respect they deserve. Respect they deserve? You're talking to me about effing respect that is deserved, yelled Bakugou. What, so now you deserve my effing respect, even after treating me like sheet? The FS up with that. I never treated you badly, Bakugou. Cementos insisted. If you just do as I say without an attitude, this could all be avoided. Oh, right. Katsuki barked. Yeah, okay. So effing muzzling me and chaining me to a goddamn piece of cement for the whole of effing Japan to see was effing respect. Everyone froze, but Katsuki didn't regret a single thing. He glared Cementos in the eye as his teacher faltered for a second. Eventually the hero said, quieter, that has nothing to do with the argument at hand. And besides, that was because you were not cooperating. If you just accepted the medal, all would have been. So what you're saying is, Katsuki said, voice dangerously quieter, because I said no, that gives you a right to muzzle and chain me, a minor and a hero student, up like some effing rabid animal. Because I said effing no? Everything was silent, and Cementos tried to backtrack from the hole he'd dug himself, opening his mouth, only to be cut off. Honestly, that sounds a lot like that one crime we're taught about in, effing primary school. Zero said calmly, eyes lit in anger. Don't compare my actions to assault, please, Zero. It is inconsiderate and false, Cementos warned. Kaminari gave him an angry look. His hands flickered with small sparks of electricity at his frustration. Funny how you knew exactly what the crime was though, sir? Cementos set his jaw and glared at him, before sighing. Fine, I'll let this go for now. One more push, though, and you're staying behind after school. Katsuki rolled his eyes and slumped in his seat. Yeah, no, he was hating this day so far, despite how his friends classmates still, were trying to make it interesting. Knowing his reputation, it was going to stay like that, or it's going to worsen. Either way, Katsuki wasn't looking forward to anything. He'd gathered by now that somehow, what he'd feared at the start of all of this had happened, and all his teachers now knew about his and Midoriya's past. As he'd expected, they now hated him even more than before. And if he was right, and all of his teachers knew about his past, well, he had hero training for the next 2 PRDS before lunch. And All Might was teaching. Times. All I did was try my best. This the kind of thanks I get? Unrelentlessly upset, They say these are the golden years. But I wish I could disappear. Ego crush is so severe. God, it's brutal out here. Brutal, by Olivia Rodrigo. Times. Katsuki had mixed feelings for heroics training. Obviously, he usually liked it, considering it was the PRD where he could focus on his fighting and saving skills for his hero career. He didn't have to study English words or the formula for some shape. He could focus on the main aspects of being a hero, the stuff he'd always wanted to do. However, this wasn't a usual training PRD. It wasn't exciting, nor made that familiar determined spark flash in his eye. Instead, it made his stomach churn viciously. It was a well-known fact, to even those who weren't close to Midoriya, not that he was close to the nerd, no, they're just rivals, that All Might and said boy were close. And by close, it's effing father figure type sheet. Seriously, even Class 1B knew about that, and when asked, prompted, Shinso had said he'd noticed too. Katsuki, being the only other student at UA who knew about their secret, knew it even better. He was there every time All Might hugged Midoriya. He was there every time All Might encouraged Midoriya. He was there every time All Might held Midoriya when he cried. He didn't want that himself. He didn't want stupid comfort. Why should he, anyway? That would be stupid and babyish. So, he knew how close All Might was to Midoriya, and vice versa. And if his suspicions that all of his teachers knew about this were true, then that included All Might. Abso-effing-lutely wonderful. Katsuki sighed, walking into a cubicle to change while everyone else changed with each other. It was just routine at this point to hide away, even before this whole thing started. As he shakily changed into his hero costume, he tried to plan some things out. He had to prepare for every situation, both because that is what he would do if this were a mission as a hero and, well, on the occasion something were to go wrong. What if he hurts you? Then, well, it's gonna take place in ground beta. Since it's open air, Katsuki'll have lots of room to escape fight back. If he's gonna be in the spectating room, there are doors and windows. And people around to witness. It'll be fine. But what if he doesn't treat you fairly? Call him out on his bull. Maybe. God, his literally All Might, skinny form or not, Katsuki can't just do that. Everyone would cheat on him for it. And so maybe the disappointed stare he'd get from the retired hero might just be too much to handle. Sue him. So he'd just take it and let it happen. But remember what Deku said? You shouldn't roll over like a coward. I can do what I effing want, shut the F up. You're wrong. But how do you know I'm wrong? You know I'm right. Because... shut the F up, already. Maybe planning wasn't such a good idea, if he was now arguing with his own DMN head. Crazy weirdo. Katsuki had been stalling for too long, he realized when he vaguely only heard less than a quarter of the original amount of boys left in the changing room. He was usually the first to finish. Time to go. That is, as soon as his heartbeat stops trying to leap out of his mouth, his body stops feeling like it's tipping off the edge of a cliff every 2 seconds, and his breathing calms down. Jesus Christ, he hated this feeling. It would eventually stop. Eventually. Plus, Izuku was pretty sure that his mentor would understand, and actually be mature about all this. You know, like adults should be doing. After all, he was All Might. And All Might was a proper hero. His favorite hero, Bakugou, was a very close second, though. He should react well, right? Should. Izuku knew he should have more faith in the retired hero, but he just couldn't help but doubt. His mind kept leaping to that day on the rooftop, how All Might had just jumped to conclusions that a boy like him couldn't become a hero. Without considering, or thinking that he could literally be super trained in heroics. He wasn't, but you get where he'd coming from, right? Now, don't get him wrong. Izuku believed that anyone could change if they put the work in and actually showed that they wanted to, and could, change for the better. Sure, that didn't mean he'd forgive everyone he sees, not if they've done something really bad or if he himself doesn't want to forgive for whatever reason, but the belief that they could change was still there. And that was his opinion, whether it was naive or not. Izuku believed that anyone could change, but there was a nagging feeling in the back of his mind that maybe All Might hadn't changed. That maybe he'd react the same way on that day on that rooftop. Sheet, When did life become so real? Where had that time gone, when he'd play heroes and villains with Bakugou without a care in the world, apart from, of course, defeating the chainsaw villain figurine? When he'd look at Bakugou and see an untouchable, powerful hero who could defeat anything and anyone, when he had yet to see the sad, broken side of his best friend. When he had started at UA and finally gained some friends and looked at Bakugou to see his friends too, genuine, caring friends who weren't just there for the power. Where had it all gone? Why had no one told him he'd be doubting the one person who he looked up to and relied on his whole life, even when things got the darkest, at some point? Why didn't anyone warn him? Tell him? And, sheet, wasn't that a thought? If the one person he relied on his whole life, perhaps just a millimeter more than his mum, turned out to be Volby, where did that leave him? Chasing after and idolizing her. Izuku was quick to dismiss the thought. He hadn't even seen All Might yet, not since Thursday, and it was Friday currently. That meant there was a good chance he knew and just decided to ignore it, right? But then the rest of the teachers wouldn't have such an abrupt change in behavior today. So that meant he probably knew now, if all the teachers did. Izuku vaguely wondered how they had come to know, before shaking it off. There were more important things. For example, what the absolute hell he was supposed to do. If, for once, his luck turns good, and All Might isn't a complete D about this all, well then there wasn't much to do, right? Just his trust and respect for All Might will reinforce, really. Nothing will change between All Might, him and Bakugou. Everything will be fine. But, if it goes south, like things usually do for him, there was no doubt about it. He'd stand up to All Might himself, if he has to. Izuku knew for a fact that Bakugou would never want to disappoint All Might, and calling him out on any ball would probably fall under that. And, despite Izuku arguably being closer to All Might, Bakugou was just as much of a fan as he was, if only toned down a little. The only problem was that he'd have to keep seeing All Might after all this, however it goes, considering he still needed help with controlling One for All. Actually, thinking about it, the old man wasn't much help at this point. It was clear he wasn't sure what to do, considering all this new stuff had never happened to him before, so Izuku had a feeling he might possibly be able to do semi-well on his own anyway. He might still go to him, but, well, despite it all, nothing had happened yet. He was just predicting the worst-case scenario, as he usually did, and he should really stop doing that before he jinxes it. Izuku sighed, pulling on his gloves for his hero costume last, and stood up. The changing room around him was less busy, so many people had already left, but he was certain Bakugou hadn't left yet. Must be a, sort of good thing, at least. This meant he could go first, see if there was anything to be on guard about, and from there, well. As Kaminari sometimes said before a test, he's just gonna wing the sheet out of this. Plus, oh Jesus holy moly in Christ, Denki thought to himself. I'm just gonna have to wing the sheet out of this, aren't I? It wasn't that he hadn't done the revising and preparing on purpose. It was more that he just didn't know there was a test to revise for. At least it wasn't based on knowledge. Still though, he was supposed to be training stealth and moves that would permit him to attack silently and effectively for the assessment, apparently. In his defense, though, he was used to Bakugou flicking him in the forehead and ordering him to come to a session with him and Kirishima, not the time for a sec joke, Denki, not the time for a sec joke, and reminding him of the upcoming tests. More like told him about it, though. Most of the time he was too busy zoning out, up in the clouds, to pay attention when the teacher announced that there was a test. He guessed that that was his fault anyway, though, right? God, he should have never gone along with the class, no matter what his reasons. He should have never pushed Bakugou away. He was such a coward. Denki glanced at the door, where Midoriya was walking through somewhat cautiously, go figure, but having hoped Bakugou to walk in instead. Here. Usually Bakugou was the first one out. He wondered what was taking so long. He hoped he was okay. The blonde sighed and looked up at Skinny Might. Wait, no, what? All Might. He preferred Skinny Might, though. Anyway, as Denki looked up at Skinny Might, he couldn't help but see how his form seemed to tense a little when Midoriya walked in, and seemed conflicted on whether to approach like he normally did or not. That was super strange, the F-dash? And yeah, Denki knew Midoriya was Skinny Mite's favorite. He didn't really mind, though, cause he had good old presentation Michael on his side instead. Best thing about that was they both had good humor, were great at languages, and both were the bestest of best friends with tired insomniac boys. But sure, he wasn't supposed to know that. Aizawa would have his head. So why were they both acting so strange around each other? Denki, with his good peopling skills, concluded someone probably told Skinny Mite he must be proud of his child, all grown up or something like that. The child being Midoriya. That happened with Aizawa and Shinso once. The funniest matching effing expressions he'd ever effing seen. Speaking of Shinso, he was bound to transfer soon, right? Oh, he hoped so. He'd be so cool to hang around. Shinso was the only person who didn't tease him for his quirk or intelligence. As much as he wouldn't admit openly, he appreciated it. Granted, that probably only meant there would be more instances to embarrass himself around the insomniac, but he'd take what he could get. If he got it at all. He should hit Aizawa with the puppy eyes when he asks if someone would be transferring anytime soon, and then hint strongly to Shinso. A foolproof plan, and would be bound to gain him some insight. Hey Kaminari, may I ask you something? Denki jumped as he was ripped from his thoughts and whipped around to see Midoriya. Jesus Christ, Mido, get a bell. Midoriya blushed and spluttered, "Yeah, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to scare you." Denki grinned, "It's fine, don't worry. I was only joking. Anyway, you wanted to ask me something? Hit me with your worst." What could he possibly have done? Did he upset Midoriya? Was Midoriya gonna call him out on not seeing him practice for the test? Or maybe he'd ask for help. Don't be stupid, why would he ask you? Midoriya smiled timidly. So. I was kinda curious about, well, this morning. Why? Denki tilted his head, confused, before snapping his fingers with realization. Oh, I get what you're talking about. Yeah, I didn't think anyone would notice, but of course you would. You're super clever and analytic. Basically, Kirishima wanted to try eyeliner, but we didn't have enough time before class, so I tried putting it on him outside class like 1 minute before, but then Vlad King came and told us to get to class cause then we'd be late and I was like, but I've only done half of one side. And he was like, in a super deep voice, no, you gotta get to class otherwise I'll tell Aizawa. And he was such a snitch but you know Aizawa and I didn't want to get in trouble with him. Midoriya cut in hesitantly, I'm so sorry, and that does really sound interesting, Kaminari. But, I think we're talking about different things? This morning, I think it was after that, probably? Denki blinked. Oh, my bad, then. But then. Oh my god, I'm so stupid. Before Midoriya could try to insist he wasn't, he was, but that was an argument for another time, he continued, you meant during class, didn't you? I thought you meant before, ha. You? Yeah, yes. Midoriya smiled sheepishly. My bad dude. Denki chuckled, but his tone got a little more serious. It's about midnight and Cementos, right? Unfortunately, Midoriya said, and Jesus, Zoo's lightning bolt Christ, the way he went from bashful to serious in 0.5 seconds was effing terrifying. You guys stood up to them for Kaken, though. I wanted to ask why you've suddenly changed your mind about him. I don't want to be angry here, but if you're only doing it to hurt him, you've got a whole other DMN thing coming. Denki might as well have just sheet his pants. He took atomically small comfort in the fact that at least Midoriya hadn't sworn. Because then he'd be F'd. Hurt? Denki exclaimed, I know. Actually, it might look like that, right? We aren't trying to, though, I promise. We just. Basically, we had a talk with Kiri. And he made us realize how shitty we were being. I knew it before, but I didn't have the courage to stop it. Useless effing. Anyway, I wanted to apologize. For everything. But I also know Bakugou probably wouldn't appreciate that. Maybe Kirishima got let off the hook, but he was close to Blasty to begin with. They were super close, so it must have been easier to accept, but I'm just me. It's not like I really meant anything to H. Midoriya seemed a little stunned. Denki laughed, trying to lift the mood as he usually did. Sorry. That turned out a little dark. But basically towards the main point, I mean to say that I couldn't just stand by while those assholes belittled Bakugou. You know? It wasn't just me, though, 'cause without Kirishima standing up first I'm ashamed to say I wouldn't have built the courage to do anything. Denki smiled brightly. I'm glad I did, though. Did you see the look on Blaster's face? It was awesome. I wish he wouldn't have looked so surprised though. But that's on us, anyway. I shouldn't really get to wish that. You know, I've already told Kirishima this, but, Midoriya smiled at him, you said you don't think you really meant anything to him, right? More like I know. Hey, the boy said, locking their eyes before Denki could look away again. Listen to me. I know Kaken loads. Sure, he has his secrets and probably some that I doubt even his parents know, let alone us. You guys have learnt that by now. But the thing is, I know him well enough to say that you did mean more to him than you can ever imagine. Remember that. Denki blinked and looked away with a small smile, nodding. Midoriya continued, and thanks, by the way, for sticking up for him. I know he doesn't like people to help him, he doesn't need help, yada yada yada. But I know deep down he appreciated it, and so do I. So, from both his part and mine, thank you. The blonde giggled bashfully. You know, you don't have to thank me. Or thank me on his part too. If anything, I should be the one thanking you for giving me a chance to tell you about how I feel. Either way though, I'm honored. Skinny Mite coughed behind him, and both Midoriya and Denki jolted at least a foot in the air. Midoriya immediately stiffened, and Denki was once again reminded of the strange shift in behavior. Being up close, he could now tell that Midoriya seemed a little uncomfortable, rather than a little awkward. Something told him the silly conclusion he'd gotten to before hadn't been right, even though it would have been so great to use as teasing ammo. Denki frowned ever so slightly, unnoticeable by anyone who wasn't looking for it. Ah, young Midoriya. Skinny Mite grinned. He tried to puff his chest out like he usually would, but in his skinny form it was less impressive. To look at his thin ribs jutting out instead of muscles. He stopped quickly as soon as he remembered he wasn't in his Big Mite form, he Big Mite and Skinny Mite, and Denki focused hard to not snort. Skinny Mite continued, sorry to interrupt, but could I talk to you for a second, young Midoriya? Midoriya's smile was so forced, Denki was half expecting tears to projectile spray out of his eyes. Or maybe he was gonna accidentally activate his quirk. Denki did that sometimes when he was stressed or trying to force happiness something. Oh of course, All Might. Denki was about to object and try to save his friend from a conversation he obviously didn't want to have, but Midoriya just smiled at him. It was smaller than the forced one but it was more genuine, so Denki guessed he could let it slide. Sorry, Kaminari. Please excuse us, I need to talk to All Might. Need to, not should, he noted. Maybe it was something important that he had to talk about but didn't want to. Denki wondered what it could be, before reprimanding himself. It was none of his business. He just kinda hoped whatever it was wouldn't make Midoriya sad or in a bad mood. Either way, Denki would try DMing well hard to cheer him up later. Yeah, sure, bro, he called after them. Nice talking to you. Midoriya waved with a smile as he began to walk with All Might towards a small corner for privacy. So, young Midoriya, how are you? He frowned and looked at the large clock in the spectating room. Bakugou was going to be late at this rate. He looked for Kirishima, or literally any one of his friends, but they were all busy either preparing for the test or talking. It all looked quite serious and they didn't look like they wanted to be interrupted. Denki furrowed his brows. He hadn't been there for Bakugou for the last 4 weeks. He had turned his back on his friend, refused to help. He had forced his thoughts and actions to become like his classmates so that he wouldn't be left behind or bullied again, and in the process been an absolute a-hole. But right now, something was wrong with his old friend. And Denki knew, he knew DMN well, that this would not fix what he had wronged. But maybe it would help show Bakugou that he still cared, even if Denki didn't deserve it. That he'd always cared. He glanced at where Midoriya was talking to Skinny Mite in the corner. Midoriya's brows seemed to be lowering lower and lower at each word the man spoke. Well, at least this would mean he wouldn't have to see Midoriya angry for the second time that day. Hopefully. Who was he kidding? If Midoriya was angry, he'd stay that way for a while. Denki knew after seeing it for himself, after all. He remembered the argument between Midoriya and the old Deku squad bitterly and vividly. He'd hated seeing his friends fight like that. With a deep breath, he turned towards the door. Something was wrong with his old explosive friend, and he was going to stop at nothing to at least try and help. After all, that's what friends do, right?